Chapter 79. Located in the deepest part of Germany's secret underground arsenal, the two wooden boxes contained items that Kale was most familiar with. Gem Yuneng, regardless of the specific use effect, a piece is enough to be regarded as a blue-grade item, and it is the best choice for the sacrificial card draw material. Venom, Blue Eagle, Senzu Bean, Vibranium Arm Guard, etc., blue cards that can greatly enhance one's personal foundation are also the items that are sacrificed for the Gem Yuneng. At this moment, Kale looked at the two large wooden boxes filled with Gem Yuneng in front of him and sighed. This should be the earliest batch of primitive energy cubes created by the Hydra organization using the magic cube to achieve further cooperation with Germany's Nash. Later, it is estimated that after the two sides fell out and cancelled the alliance, the Hydra organization did not provide energy weapons to the German army, and these primitive energy cubes were stored with the collections of various countries by Hitler. About 50 pieces, this should be the last batch of infinite energy cubes. Kale estimated in his heart. Tons of gold and gems, precious collection items from all over the world, plus these Gem Yuneng, that is enough to draw 5 blue-grade cards. This harvest from the German underground arsenal is unprecedented. These things are not convenient to transport out by means of transportation. How should we deal with them? Logan asked with a frown. He had been guarding the door of the arsenal and didn't see that Kale had emptied half of the arsenal supplies. That's how we deal with them. Kale shrugged and didn't hide it. He directly extracted one of the energy cubes in the box. At the end of the 3-second card draw time, one of the energy cubes disappeared from the box out of thin air and was converted into a card and stored in the material card area of the card space. What's going on? Witnessing a magical scene like magic, Logan's eyes widened in surprise, as he had never seen such a supernatural phenomenon in his life for half a century. It's nothing, it's one of my natural abilities to store items in another space. Kale explained while extracting the remaining Gem Yuneng in the box. He did not intend to hide his ability to draw items. After all, Logan was now one of his own. It did not matter if he exposed part of his ability in front of him. After a few minutes, the 2 boxes of gems were all drawn. Kale's target turned directly to the many collections in the dark room. He did not miss a single one. Looking at the large dark room that was quickly emptied by Kale's card-drawing ability, Logan finally sighed. This ability is really convenient. Logan himself was a genetically mutated ability user, so his acceptance of special abilities was still very high. However, when he recalled the previous sodium-carbon steel sword, vibranium arm guards, Blue Eagle monster, and Venom suit, he once again refreshed his understanding of Kale. The person he was following now seemed to be someone who was even more extraordinary than the war hero on the surface. After spending a lot of time, Kale extracted the last famous painting from the collection. Only then did he leave the sealed underground military warehouse dark room with Logan and forcibly open an exit to return to the surface. When the two returned to the square of the presidential palace in Berlin, where a large number of Allied forces were stationed, they happened to meet Fry, who was about to look for them. "Kale, where did you go?" Fury wiped the sweat off his forehead with his sleeves and looked at Kyle, who had appeared out of nowhere. He panted and said, "I asked the rear to arrange for a transport jet to come here as the first batch of soldiers to return to the United States. Some of the injured officers and hostages have been prepared. You're the only one left." He paused and continued, "Germany has completely lost. In a few days, the officials will be gathered to sign the surrender agreement. The Allied forces do not need to be stationed here for a long time. They will leave in batches." Kale asked curiously, "The results of this battle are not bad, right?" Fry nodded and said, "It's not bad. This time, we are the main force. Of course, we have to occupy enough scientific talents and weapons resources. Then let's go." Kale nodded and motioned for Logan to follow behind him. The three of them were about to leave the main square of Berlin and head toward the large open space large enough for the transport fighter to land. An American correspondent hurriedly squeezed out from the group of Allied soldiers and approached Kale's side. He quickly and quietly reported a few words in his ear. "Okay, I got it." Kale nodded expressionlessly. After the correspondent left, his young and handsome face could not help but show an unconcealable anger. "What happened?" Fry stared at Kale in surprise and asked. Logan also stopped in silence. Kale lowered his voice and replied, "Just an hour ago, 2 foreign agents in black leather sneaked into the battleship behind us. They killed more than a dozen Navy soldiers and took away Natasha, who was locked up in the interrogation room. They are really daring. The Allied war is not over yet. At this juncture, they sent agents to attack from the rear?" Fry could not help but become angry when he heard this. Before the war, they sent agents to sneak into the battleship to carry out a mission targeting Kale. After this war, they were even more presumptuous to send other agents to directly take away the prisoners. Fry said in a deep voice, "Should we report this to General Chester now? Put pressure on the Soviet Union. There is no need for that. This matter ends here. I will slowly deal with it in the future." Kale shook his head gently and looked at the Soviet troops stationed not far away. There was a hint of a sneer on his face. He wanted to play dirty tricks on him and then move on to the talent he wanted. This matter, from the beginning of the Red Room organization's first move, it would not be the end. It would only be the beginning. "Let's go." Kale snorted coldly and left the main square with Fry and Logan. After they left, the Soviet officers stationed in the square collectively felt a chill from the bottom of their hearts. They had an inexplicable feeling that something was wrong. The Soviet officers who participated in this war could not help but bring the battle report and results back to their motherland. Another thing was to convey more information about the American Emperor Kale, this war hero. The American Emperor Kale must be treated with caution. They could not easily make an enemy of him. After all, he was a man who relied on himself to affect the entire large-scale war situation and accelerate the pace of the war. What the Soviet officers did not know was that a certain military agent organization in their motherland had already made Kale deeply remember 2 times. 10 minutes later. Chapter 80. Above the Atlantic Ocean, the wings of the giant transport fighter glided through the clouds, tearing a few white wounds in the blue sky. After more than a month of war, the officers who participated in the battle as the vanguard were physically and mentally exhausted. They quickly fell asleep on the soft seats in the cabin. As for the scientists who were captured as hostages, under the watch of the armed soldiers, they all looked solemn and kept silent. This also caused the cabin of the transport fighter to be so quiet that only the various internal equipment and the faint sound of the external airflow could be heard. Kale sat on a seat by the window and closed his eyes to rest. His mind gradually fell into the vast card space. After this large-scale battle where the Allied forces occupied Germany, he was probably the biggest winner. The spoils of war from the battlefield and the underground arsenal had reached an astonishing number. In the vast card space, tens of thousands of item cards were suspended in the area where the material cards were waiting to be processed. Each of them glowed with 3 different colors of white, green, and blue, just like the stars in the night sky of the grassland competing to shine each other. In fact, the proportion of white item cards was the lowest. Basically, they were cheap and common equipment that Kale had casually drawn in the early stages of the battle. Later on, because green-grade weapons and equipment were scattered all over the battlefield, he was too lazy to look at white-grade items in the later stages of the battle, let alone draw them. Kale first organized the cards in the material card area. Gold, gems, and other valuable items were all transferred to the item card area for storage. They would be used to support the development of the forces in the future. More German weapons and items were left in the material card area. To him, these old equipment were useless and it would be a pity to throw them away. According to the usual practice, he would just use them as a sacrifice for the material card. Sacrifice draw cards. With a thought in Kale's mind, tens of thousands of green item cards that were chosen to be sacrificed immediately levitated. One by one, they shattered and disappeared. Then, thousands of brand new cards were created to replace them. 1,000 consecutive draws. You have sacrificed, German-made Mauser pistol, X1023, German-made rifle, X2046. Mauser 98K, X59, General machine gun, X49. Reconnaissance instrument, X26, German-made grenade, X186. Although they were all green item cards, it was the first time he had drawn such a large number of them. Seeing this, Kale's heart trembled slightly. Draw successful. Congratulations on receiving Life Enhancement, X34, Piranha, Golden Lion, Galaxy Alliance Language Proficiency, Military Tank, Laptop, Unhatched Monster Egg. As the thousands of new cards drawn from the sacrifice appeared, a dark blue card flew out while emitting a dense green light. It wasn't easy. After 1,000 consecutive draws, I've finally gotten a card of the right grade. Kyle sighed as he reached out to take the new rare blue card. Unhatched Egg, a mutated giant monster egg. Rare blue creature card. It was a strange egg that was suspected to be a hybrid between an ancient lizard and a dinosaur. It had not fully hatched yet and needed to be placed in a warm and stable place for a long time to hatch. What the hell is this? Kale was a little confused. It was the first time he had drawn such a type of creature card. Whether it was the blue eagle, that could be continuously summoned, the ancient giant dragon turtle, or the poisonous hornet nest, that could only be summoned once, it was at the mature stage of summoning. Only the initial symbiotic venom body, when it was first drawn, it was at the growth stage of a newborn baby. This time it was even more ridiculous. Directly giving you an egg and letting you slowly incubate it. But just the creature egg alone is at the rare blue grade. Then the creature that hatches, when it grows up, I'm afraid it will be at the purple grade. Dinosaur monster? Alien creature? Kale touched his chin and fell into deep thought. Finally, he transferred the card in his hand to the top of the creature card area to store it. Who knows how long this egg will take to incubate? It would be funny if it hatched for a century or two and still didn't break the shell. Kale once again sorted out the thousands of new green cards and divided them into ability cards, creature cards, item cards, material cards, and other areas according to their attributes. Only then did his eyes fall on the 50 blue grade, gem energy, cards. It turned out that relying on low-grade item cards for the sacrificial draw was unreliable. The probability of drawing a super-grade card was pitifully low. If he wanted to get a high-grade card, he would have to sacrifice item cards of the same grade. I'll have to rely on you guys again this time. Kale's eyes were filled with anticipation as he put all the gem energy into the sacrificial materials. You've sacrificed gem energy, X50. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining Cling, Alien Bomb, Elven Protection, Life Increase, Air Sprint. 2 dark blue and 3 light blue. 5 new cards with blue light appeared clearly and quietly suspended in the air above the card space. They all seem to be good stuff. Is the goddess of luck finally on my side? Kale licked his dry lips excitedly and quickly checked the other 4 blue cards in addition to the familiar, Life Increase, card. Cling, can freely cling to any cover. Blue ability card. Within half an hour of activating the skill, even if the glass wall of the building is smooth, you can easily climb and fix yourself, and even climb and walk freely at any angle. Cooldown time is 3 hours. Current status, skill type ability card, does not affect physique and genes. Isn't this similar to the ability of the little spider in the future? Kale pondered, but since it is an independent skill, Cling seems to be a little stronger than spider crawling. After all, it can treat the wall as a flat ground and walk freely. The only drawback is that the skill type card has a cooldown time. Venom, who can learn the host's ability, happens to make up for this shortcoming. After the Sneak skill, the second skill type blue card is still okay. Kale put away, Kling, and then looked at the remaining 3 new cards. Alien Bomb, an alien bomb from outer space technology. Blue item card. A small round bomb, which contains destructive explosive power. After the button is activated, the bomb will irreversibly enter a 10-second countdown, and after 10 seconds, it will devour and destroy everything within a 100-meter range. Small nuclear bomb. Kale's eyelids twitched. If he was slightly affected by this thing, he was afraid that even if he didn't die, his skin would be peeled off. Elven Blessing, a blessing from nature's elves. Blue creature card. Summon nature's elves and let them bless others. Those who receive blessings can gain nature affinity and nature's favor. Current status, one-time use, can be used on 1 unit of others. Cannot be used on the card owner, murderous aura is too strong. After the monster egg, there is another weird creature card. Kale frowned and put it directly with the monster egg card. He went on to look at the last new card, and his heart shook. His eyes revealed a look of pleasant surprise. Chapter 81. The first transport plane that returned from Berlin landed at the New York military base around 8:00 in the evening. The New York military base was brightly lit. After the plane landed and opened the cabin door, the airport outside the plane suddenly burst into thunderous applause. Some of the vanguard officers got off the plane one after another. When it was Kale's turn to walk down the plane in a black combat suit, the applause obviously became more intense. Kyle glanced around as he walked and found that there were dozens of military officers and officials in suits waiting to receive him. Among them, General Chester, who was in charge of this battle, was also present. Beside the restricted area guarded by the American soldiers, there was also a group of reporters and photographers holding up old-fashioned camera equipment. They were taking pictures as fast as they could, and the flashes of their cameras were flashing incessantly. Everyone, thank you for your hard work. General Chester first greeted the people who got off the plane, then stepped forward. Under the surprised eyes of many officers and officials, he patted Kale's shoulder and smiled. Kale, well done. You're worthy of being a war hero. At least I'm worthy of the Major General badge you gave me. Kale shrugged and pointed at the badge on the left shoulder of his combat suit. He put it on before he got off the plane. Many officials from both the military and the government shook their heads and smiled bitterly. Probably only Kale dared to say something like this to a 5-star general. General Chester didn't care. He smiled and said, "You've been fighting on the front line for more than a month. You've worked hard. Go back and rest for a few days. After a few days of rest, there's another battle for me to go to?" Kale asked casually. After all, the main force of the war, Germany, had just been defeated. It showed that all the wars in the European theater were over. World War II was also coming to an end. There's a plan. General Chester moved his mouth, but he quickly stopped. He looked at Kale meaningfully and said softly, "I'll tell the soldiers to inform you. You go home and rest first. As a hero the country is proud of, you can't fall from exhaustion." Although the last sentence was said in a teasing tone, there was genuine concern in his words. Kale nodded and said, "Then I'll be leaving first. Fry will finish the handover in Germany." At some point, Fry had become his exclusive spokesperson. As soon as he finished speaking, Fry, who was wearing a left eye patch, walked in front of the transport aircraft on the parking lot, and the armed soldiers behind him escorted the hostages off the aircraft. The officials at the airport also turned their attention to the hostages. Defeating Germany was one thing, but obtaining German scientists and military information was equally important. While their attention was diverted, Kale waved his hand and signaled for Logan, who was among the disembarking soldiers, to follow him. The two of them left the military airport together. Seeing Kale leave, a large number of reporters and photographers hurriedly carried their camera equipment and chased after him, wanting to interview him. After all, Kale was not like Steve. Steve was the Captain America promoted by the government, so he had done a lot of interviews and publicity before he went to the battlefield. Cale, on the other hand, was a hero who had always been fighting on the battlefield. Although there were many documentaries, he had never been interviewed. Any media in New York dreamed of getting a first-hand interview with Cale. The reporters carried their camera equipment and sped up all the way. When they were about to catch up at the main entrance of the military airport, an extended version of a luxury car suddenly stopped outside the door. Cale and Logan directly opened the door. After they got in, the car immediately started, leaving behind a trail of exhaust gas for the reporters to catch their breath. Inside the extended version of the luxury car, a professional bodyguard acted as the driver and sat in the main driver's seat. The middle and back of the car were hollow, and the space was spacious enough. Luxury sofas were placed on both sides of the door. Under the comfortable light on the roof of the car, Cale and Logan sat on the sofa on one side of the car, and on the other side sat a gentleman with a mustache. Who else could it be but Howard? Fortunately, you were not entangled by those reporters, otherwise it would have been difficult to get away. Howard patted his chest with lingering fear. Obviously, he was used to dealing with reporters. If I wanted to go, how could they stop me? Cale smiled faintly, and then asked with a little surprise, "But when did you come back from the base in Europe?" Howard replied, "The Scientific Research Institute in the UA. They asked me to come over to help half a month ago, but it just ended a few days ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't have time to pick you up. The current project of the Scientific Research Institute is nuclear weapons, right?" Cale asked straightforwardly. Howard didn't say it directly, but he nodded slowly. The scientific research technology is already in the final stage. It probably won't be long before they can produce objects for experiments. It seems that the war is really coming to an end. Cale said to himself, and leaned on the sofa, a little lost in thought. Once the war was over, the arrangement of the private forces would have to start. Oh right. Who is this, won't you introduce him? Howard looked at Logan, who was sitting next to Cale and hadn't said a word since he got in the car. Just call him Logan. I met him on the battlefield, so he's my. Cale hesitated, and couldn't find an appropriate identity to describe him. In the end, he simply spat out 2 words, bodyguard. A national hero who symbolized conquest and strength, a warrior who stood at the top of the UA military, needed a bodyguard? Howard was dumbfounded. He looked at Logan, who was still silent, and then at Cale, who had a serious look on his face. He asked in disbelief, "Really? I'm not lying to you." Cale smiled and said, "You'll know when Logan shows his strength in the future. You'll be very interested in him then. He can't be an ordinary person to be chosen by you as your bodyguard." Howard looked at Logan expectantly and introduced himself enthusiastically, "Hello, my name is Howard Stark." Logan nodded coldly and didn't say anything. He was still not good at getting along with others. Howard touched his beard a little awkwardly and suggested to Cale, "Last time at the training base, I said I'd treat you to a drink when I came back. Since you're free tonight, why don't we have a few drinks together?" "Sure." Cale nodded in agreement. He had just returned to New York and didn't have much to do for a while. The luxury car left the area where the military base was and entered the downtown area of New York from the city's main road. Finally, it stopped in front of a tall building. "I thought you were going to take me to a bar. Why did you change your mind this time?" Cale got out of the car and looked up at the center of New York streets. It rose from the ground, and the roof couldn't be seen for hundreds of meters. The modern industrial building was about 60 stories high and was made of solid reinforced concrete. The windows on each floor of the building were lit during the day, and the figures of the staff could be vaguely seen. In the middle of the high-tech high-rise building, there was a giant English font of Stark Industries, made of lights. Chapter 82. The Stark Industries building was a spectacular building with an artistic style. The whole building had a sense of technology and fashion. It was 190 meters tall and had 62 floors. It could easily accommodate thousands of people and was one of the landmarks of New York. In Howard's words, it's a so-so. It's much worse than the Empire State Building. The main reason was that we didn't have enough funds back then, so we could only barely build such a big office building. In addition to this office building, Stark Industries also has a futuristic technology plaza where they release new products. There are also 3 large production factories in the suburbs of New York. At this time, on the 62nd floor of the Stark Industries building, the chairman's office was located. Logan was guarding outside the office. Cale and Howard were both holding wine glasses. They stood by the floor-to-ceiling window that replaced the outer wall of the building. Looking down, they could see more than half of the night view of New York. Howard smiled and said, "When it comes to wine, no bar can compare to the collection in my office. Also, as a major shareholder, you haven't seen the Stark Industries building with your own eyes. That's why I brought you here. It's indeed much better than I expected." Cale nodded and commented. He had said that he was investing in Stark Industries, but in reality, he was also investing in Howard. It won't be long before Stark Industries proves to the world that technology can change the future. Howard smiled and raised his wine glass to Cale. The wine glasses of the 2 men clinked against each other, and they both drank the red wine in their glasses. After drinking a few glasses of wine, Howard's occupational disease acted up. He urged Cale to look at the newly developed products. In the luxurious office on the top floor, there was a hidden layer on the inner wall. Howard walked to an exhibition table and confirmed with his fingerprint, eye mask, and voice. The wall instantly opened up to reveal a squarish machine in the first insurance counter that protruded outwards. The more Cale looked at it, the more familiar it was. The machine could be held in his hand. The screen only took up a small part of it, and most of it was dialing numbers. "Isn't this a phone?" Cale was stunned. It was a wireless phone with a keyboard? "Yes, it's a mobile phone." Howard shrugged and explained, "Ever since you gave me the mobile phone a few months ago, I've asked the elites in the industry to disassemble it day and night. They found that there are many fine hardware parts that can't be mass-produced with the current manufacturing level. However, many of the functions of that phone are too advanced. In fact, as a portable communication device, as long as it could satisfy the current real-time communication function of people. Therefore, I designed the mass-produced cell phone to be more direct and simple. I plan to display it at the Future Technology Exhibition in New York Square after the war, and then build a communication tower in New York to promote it." Without waiting for Howard to finish, Cale was already speechless with admiration. This was what a tech guru was like. Just give him a phone, and he could figure out how to mass-produce it. It was only 1944. In a few years, wireless phones will be popularized. While Cale was still in a daze, Howard had already put away the first safe and opened the second hidden layer on the side wall. Gotcha. The movement this time was obviously much bigger. Accompanied by the white cold air gushing out of the hidden room, what was pushed out was not a safe, but a huge desktop machine full of wires. It looked like countless electronic parts were exquisitely pieced together. On the surface, various indicator lights were constantly flashing, and there was a slight noise when it was running. "Howard, don't tell me this is a supercomputer?" Cale forced a smile. Howard smiled but didn't say anything. He clapped his hands and ordered the huge desktop machine, "Jarvis, say hello to Cale." "Jarvis?" Before Cale could react, the huge desktop machine made a beep sound, and then responded with a calm male voice, "Mr. Howard, welcome back." "Mr. Cale, good evening, welcome." Cale was shocked. Even with his state of mind, he was so shocked that he almost threw the phone in his hand. "Ha ha ha, I must have scared you." Howard patted Cale's stiff shoulder and explained, "This is just a supercomputer, but I've equipped it with intelligent speech recognition and a command reply program for greetings. Why did you call him Jarvis? Kale still hadn't recovered and asked. Jarvis is the name of the housekeeper in my current residence. It makes me feel very close and at ease. Howard looked at the supercomputer in front of him with an expectant expression and said in a deep voice, I used the computer mainframe and intelligent chip you gave me to create the world's first supercomputer with a semi-intelligent program, and named it Jarvis. I also hope that one day, it won't only rely on the system's command program, but it will truly become a sentient artificial intelligence life and be separated from these hardware devices. So that's how it is. Kyle took a deep breath and fell silent for a moment. Was this a mistake, or were both father and son made from the same mold? Jarvis, as the future artificial intelligence of the 21st century and Iron Man's personal housekeeper, was created in the most primitive state in advance by his father. Maybe we don't have to wait until the 21st century for artificial intelligence Jarvis to be completely born. Kale was excited and a little worried when he thought of this. He thought that he was already the biggest butterfly effect in the Marvel world. Who would have thought that the 2 green item cards he drew, after trading with Howard, would bring even greater potential changes to the future of the world? Technology, the #1 productivity. Using the heart to subvert the world. Right. Howard seemed to remember something and put the supercomputer Jarvis back into the dark room. He stepped towards the 3rd dark wall to operate the access control. What else is there? Please show it all at once. I can't stand it. Kale said with a slight gasp. This is different from the 2 objects just now. Although it has been researched, it is completely useless now. After Howard finished speaking, the safe was pushed out from the 3rd dark wall. There was only a design drawing drawn with a pencil. This is? Kale picked up the design drawing with a slight surprise. Since it was placed in the 3rd dark room, it proved that its value was no less than the semi-finished Jarvis. This is a new element structure that I finally deduced after in-depth research on the Rubik's Cube more than a month ago. It is not on the chemical element table. I believe it can replace infinite energy. Chapter 83. Structure sketch of unknown elements. Draw a design sketch with the internal structure of unknown elements. White item card. Kale looked down at the element structure diagram in his hand that had been heavily drawn by the pencil and fell into deep thought for a long time. Although this is only a theoretical structure deduced by Howard from the magic cube, he still knows that this element is a new element energy in the true sense, and it is an isotope similar to the material composition of the cosmic stone. The main core energy of the future Iron Man armor is replaced by this synthetic elemental energy crystal. A small elemental crystal of the reserve core can support the continuous combat consumption of the high-tech Iron Man armor. Laser strike, jet flight, JRVIS, artificial intelligence system, etc. What level of technology does it take to try to artificially synthesize this new element? I mean, what are the current technological obstacles to synthesizing this new element? Kale put down the design drawing in his hand and looked directly at Howard next to him. If it can be artificially synthesized and mass-produced on a large scale, the crystallization of this new element energy can replace the energy cube of the remaining gem energy. There is no doubt that it can be used as a material for the blue-tier sacrifice draw card. Special materials to build acceleration pipelines, and instruments to emit stable high-energy particle rays, these are all difficulties at the forefront of science that have not been solved so far, and it is not something that can be easily broken through in recent years. Howard threw up his hands a little helplessly and said in a joking tone, to be honest, I kind of intend to put away this element structure diagram and let my descendants slowly complete it in the future. You don't have children yet. Kale complained, and Howard glared at him and said angrily, tonight I will ask a few young girls with great figures to make a baby. Poor Tony, Kale couldn't help but laugh. The future genius engineer, Tony Stark, hadn't been born yet. It was estimated that he would have to wait for another 10 years or so. Howard, the man in front of him, only had a child when he was old. However, even if Tony is born early, with the limitations of technology in the current era, it is indeed impossible to artificially synthesize this new element with infinite possibilities. Do I really have to wait half a century before trying to make it? Kale was a little dissatisfied. The elemental blueprint in front of him was clearly a treasure map, but there was no corresponding key to open it. The randomness of the sacrificial draw card was too high, and it was impossible to draw out an item that was specifically needed. Alright, don't think too much about it. Let's take it one step at a time. Maybe in a few years or a decade, suitable materials and equipment will be invented. Howard patted Kale on the shoulder and comforted him. He had only felt regret at first, but he didn't expect his partner to be so interested in the new element. That's the only way. Kale sighed and put the design back into the safe in the hidden layer. But the moment he released his hand, a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind. Wait a minute. Are you short on special materials? The limitations of current technology? Kale's eyes lit up. He seemed to have forgotten something. He smiled and said, Howard, I suddenly thought of a place that should have the special materials to create this new element, as well as the scientific level. Where? When Howard heard this, he was also stunned. He said hesitantly, it can't be the outer space of the Earth, right? It's in a corner of the Earth, but it's isolated from the rest of the world. The outside world can't spy on the inside information, and ordinary people can't easily step into that territory. Kale said with a shrug. That was a place blessed by the heavens. A certain rare metal ore was used as a common material, and the level of technology was definitely ahead of the Earth's for decades. After seeing the cross-century scientific products provided by Kale, Howard naturally believed his words. He asked with great interest, then how do we get there? If there are materials and advanced radiation equipment, I'm confident that I can create the new element. No hurry. If you want to go there, it will take some time to arrange and prepare. Kale kept him in suspense. The technology there was developed, but the rules and laws were too primitive and barbaric. Now, there was a deep-rooted rejection of humans from the outside world. He couldn't guarantee that he and Howard wouldn't be directly besieged by the locals if they rushed into that place. Let's wait until the war is over. With military affairs at hand, we can't take too much time out for private actions. Kale said. With his current status as a major general, it would be too eye-catching for him to go abroad for no reason. The matter of synthesizing the new element came to an end. After Kale and Howard finished looking at the results of the research, they sat back on the sofa by the window in the office and continued to taste the unfinished bottle of red wine. I almost forgot. There's something I need to ask of you. Kale remembered Logan outside the door and asked Howard, the Logan you saw just now was originally from Canada. Now that he came to the United States with me, I hope you can arrange an American identity for him. Howard nodded and agreed without hesitation. That's easy. Give me his full name and age. I'll find someone to take care of it tomorrow. His name will be Logan Carl. Kale gave the full name he had thought of long ago. He hesitated and muttered, as for his actual age, he's probably in his 60s, Howard was sipping a mouthful of red wine like a gentleman. When he heard Logan's age, he was so shocked that he choked. He quickly took out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his wet trousers. He said in shock, 60 years old? That bodyguard of yours just now? He looks like he's in his early 30s. It's just that the hair on his face is a bit lush. Kale smiled and said, I already said he wasn't an ordinary person. But to prevent others from having the same reaction as you, I'll arrange for him to register as 35 years old. Age and one's own appearance couldn't be judged from the perspective of an ordinary person. His super soldier constitution made his aging speed 4 times slower than an ordinary person's. In addition to his vitality and super healing factor, as well as some life-adding cards that increased his natural lifespan. Kale believed that even if another century passed, his body would still be at the peak of his youth. His physique and appearance wouldn't have the slightest change in aging. Red Skull was right. Since the genetic modification of the super soldier's ability, they were no longer called human, a dimensional life form. Chapter 84. Logan, come in. Yes, boss. Logan, who was at the elevator outside the office, moved quickly. After hearing Kale's call, he immediately opened the door and walked into the office on the top floor. Boss. Kale, who was sitting on the soft sofa, was slightly stunned, but he quickly reacted. He had treated Logan as his bodyguard in the car earlier, so he was the boss. He coughed and pointed his palm at Howard beside him. He said to Logan, who was standing in front of him, "Howard is the founder of Stark Industries. He'll arrange an American citizenship for you tomorrow morning. Your full name will be Logan Carl. Do you have any objections?" "No problem." Logan nodded. As long as his surname was not changed, it made no difference to him. "Howard, please take care of Logan here in New York from now on," Kale said. It was obvious that he wanted to keep Logan in New York to arrange the follow-up matters. "I have a feeling that the two of us will definitely become friends in the future," Howard said with a gentle smile, which could be considered as a gesture of goodwill to Logan. Although Logan did not reply this time, he was not so unreasonable. His cold face softened a lot as he nodded in response. Howard took out a check from his suit pocket and put it on the low glass table. He then said, "This is the dividends from your shares in Stark Industries for the last 2 months. It's a total of $200,000. I'll now transfer it to you by bank check." $200,000 could easily buy a high-rise building in the center of New York. Kale's face was calm. Logan also walked forward without any fluctuation in his emotions and took the check for him. No matter what, both of them were men who emptied Germany's national treasury. When one's wealth reached a certain height, it was really just a bunch of astronomical figures. It could not cause any psychological waves. However, the bank check provided by Howard was a solid source of funds, so there was no need for Kale to sell the gold and gems in the card space through underground channels. Howard continued, "Also, last time when you were at the training base, you mentioned developing the island and building the fortress. After I returned to New York, I found a very professional engineering and construction company. When World War II is over, we can start the construction immediately." He was very concerned about the things that Kale had mentioned earlier. He saw it as the same level of work as developing new products. "That's great." When Kale heard this, he immediately toasted Howard happily. He was even more excited than when he received the $200,000. The development and construction of the fortress on the island was the foundation and future of the private forces. Kale controlled his strength as he patted Howard's thin shoulders and said excitedly, "The gravity magnet equipment you gave me also gave me an idea. In the future, the fortress building on the island must have a gravity room. It can freely adjust and increase the gravity inside by several times. It would be great if it could be more than 10 times. Gravity room? It sounds good for training, but 10 times is too scary. Even if you go in there, you will be crushed by yourself. The anti-gravity equipment can't reach such a high value." Howard smiled bitterly and immediately gave a specific suggestion to correct him. With the current anti-gravity device, the positive and negative gravity fields on the floor and ceiling should be able to increase the maximum gravity in the room to 5 times. A gravity room with 5 times the gravity is barely okay. Kale nodded and commented. 5 times the gravity for him would probably take some time to get used to, but if it was used to train people with super agent physiques, it would be more than enough. It's not just a gravity room. If you want to do it well, you can equip a supercomputer with intelligent system management and voice control," Howard said, extending the topic. Kale immediately said, "The intelligent system is not enough. At least ensure that the entire island is integrated with the fortress. The intelligent reconnaissance can cover the entire island and accurately strike at one point. The two drank wine while having a heated discussion about the idea of building a fortress. Logan, who was standing next to them, didn't understand but felt that it was awesome. These two people weren't ordinary people. One was a transmigrator who received all kinds of information from another world and had advanced ideas. The other was an engineer with top technology and a super brain in the world of Marvel. When the two talked, they could basically understand what the other was talking about. They could use this to derive and upgrade, fix the flaws, and expand on the specifics. The main thing was, Cale was responsible for the brainstorming ideas, and Howard was responsible for fixing the professional theory and turning it into reality. The lively discussion in the office lasted until late at night before it finally stopped. The opportunity to end it was when Howard got drunk and fell on the soft sofa in the office. He muttered in a daze, "Let the island fly in the sky. That won't work." Then he verbally talked about a bunch of complicated numbers, Newton's formula, anti-gravity theory. "Have a good rest, my friend." Cale shrugged and stood up from the sofa. He waved his hand and quietly left the office on the top floor with Logan. "Howard really doesn't have any guard against others," Logan whispered as he entered the elevator. In his life, he had experienced attacks, betrayals, wandering, and so on. He was cautious and guarded against everyone who approached him. It's not that he doesn't have any guard against others. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to start from scratch and freely switch between the military and private industries. Cale smiled and explained, "Only when you really make friends with him will he be so relaxed and willing to trust you and reveal his true nature." Logan's expression was that he didn't fully understand. After Cale and Logan left the Stark Industries building, they booked a double room in a VIP luxury hotel on a nearby street. After they finished washing up in their respective rooms, they changed into casual and comfortable clothes. Then they stood together on the open-air balcony and looked down at the bright lights of the night. "Logan, I just took you to see Howard. You should know my intentions." Cale faced the night breeze and turned to look at the silent Logan beside him. Logan nodded and whispered, "I can roughly guess that you want to build a fortress on an overseas island and cultivate your own personal power. To be precise, it's a family of power. Cal will be the name of the family in the future. The family emblem will be a poker card." Cale smiled faintly. A card had appeared between his fingers at some point and he was toying with it. "You can say that you're the first person to enter the family, Cal. You're a thief." "Ahem," he said solemnly. "You just need to know that I've never treated you as a subordinate. If you choose to follow me, then you'll be a part of the family, Cal, from now on." "I understand." Logan was touched. Previously, he thought that Cale would hand him over to the military or Howard to be researched as a man-made weapon. He didn't expect Cale to directly include him in the ranks of the future family. Chapter 85. On the balcony of the top floor of the luxurious hotel. Cale looked straight at Logan and said thoughtfully, "Since we're all on the same side, then I'll be direct. I still have a test mission for you. Only when you complete the mission will you be considered a member of the family, Cal." "What mission?" "Whether it's assassinating an enemy country's military officer or infiltrating another country's territory to obtain information, there's no problem with any of these." Logan gave a confident and cold answer. "The mission is very simple." Cale's eyes carried a hint of playfulness as he said softly, "I'll provide you with enough funds to rent a large manor in the outskirts of New York by yourself. Then in the name of adoption, pick 10 children between the ages of 8 and 10 from any orphanage in America. It doesn't matter if they're male or female, as long as they're healthy. Adopt 10 children, me?" Logan opened his mouth wide as he looked at the serious Cale with a bit of a dumbfounded expression. Cale nodded and said, "That's right. Right now it's still a time of war. There are so many orphans in the orphanage that there's almost no place to stay. You can bribe the director. Don't talk about adopting 10 children, even adopting 20 children wouldn't be hard. When the time comes, you can ask Howard to help you hire a few nannies to make 3 meals a day and clean the manor. Wouldn't that be the end of it? That's not the problem. How am I supposed to adopt children? Logan shook his head as his scalp went numb. He pointed at his cold face that had experienced the vicissitudes of life. Looking at this ruffian and evil face, then looking at this body and ability, he was a standard fighting talent. Why would he take on a nanny-type mission? Cale asked back, why do you think you can't do it? I only know how to kill and fight. I don't know how to take care of children. You should change to another test mission. Logan's attitude was very firm. He was a lone wolf that hid his sharp claws at all times. How could he use his hands to kindly tug and teach those children? Logan. If you do this, won't you be the same as before? Cale smiled and said, you've lived alone for so many years, burdened with hatred and evil thoughts. You've burned, killed, looted, schemed against each other, killed and robbed, and finally licked your wounds at night. When you killed the saber-toothed tiger in Germany, didn't you say that you wanted to abandon your lonely and miserable life and be your true self? If you don't even dare to accept this mission and continue to close your heart to others, then you will never be able to return to your original self. Instead, you will gradually become the second saber-toothed tiger. Logan's whole body trembled when he heard that. His brows furrowed, and his hands gripped the iron railing of the balcony. No one knew what he was thinking. After a few minutes of silence, he relented and said, I understand. I accept this test mission. That's good. Cale heaved a sigh of relief. It wasn't easy to convince Logan to agree to take care of the children. Since this test mission could try to ease Logan's high guard against others, it could also lay a foundation for his future forces. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Besides, who said that Uncle Wolf didn't have a hidden talent for babysitting? Logan sighed and said, although I can't guarantee that I can do it well, I will try my best. Don't worry. You just have to be the owner of the manor and let those adopted children live there. There will be nannies and cleaners for daily life. For learning, you can ask Howard to hire another professional tutor to teach them about culture. As for combat skills, we'll talk about it later. Cale comforted him. He only had 1 super agent ability card on him now and couldn't give it to enough people at the same time. Without the ability to be a super agent, there was no way to continuously draw cards and give others blue ability cards. Many things still had to wait until after World War II to plan and act. One night passed. After the two rested in their respective rooms, they didn't meet up again and went their separate ways in the morning. Logan rushed to the Stark Industries building alone, received the ID that Howard had arranged for him to change, and went to carry out the test mission that was agreed upon last night. Cale thought that since it was rare for him to return to New York during the war, since General Chester hadn't sent soldiers to inform him of the order, he had time to check on Lucy, who was temporarily living in his home. Walking on the bustling modern streets with leather shoes, Cale also relied on the symbiotic venom to slightly disguise his appearance. He wore a brand new gentleman's suit, a large round hat that cast a shadow, and a pair of sunglasses. Just like that, he walked in the middle of the crowd, and no one discovered his identity. In fact, even if they saw him and felt that he looked familiar, no one dared to believe that the war hero they saw on the screen in the screening room and in various newspapers would suddenly walk past them like a gentleman. Major General Cale led more than 2 million Allied troops to completely capture Frankfurt and arrived at the UA military base last night. From time to time, there would be children selling newspapers running back and forth on the pedestrian street, shouting as they passed by. Kyle couldn't help but lower the brim of his hat. If he was recognized on the street, he would probably have to use his climbing ability to escape to a nearby building. Cale secretly sighed. As the first superhero to become famous, it was hard to say whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. But from training soldiers from a young age to today's step, the starting point was never just for others. The greater the ability, the greater the responsibility? First, be yourself and grasp your own life and destiny. Therefore, he was never a superhero in the true sense of the word. As he walked along the bustling street, Kyle suddenly stopped in his tracks. He was keenly aware that something was wrong with his surroundings. Passers-by of various colors still hurried past him, but they were like three-dimensional images reflected by the projection, without any vitality. The cries of children selling newspapers, the sound of cars driving and horns, and the trivial conversations of pedestrians. These sounds seemed to pass through layers of space and could not be transmitted to where he was. Soon, even their figures were blurred and dissipated. The UA, the American continent, and even the entire world, only Kale was left standing quietly on the empty streets of New York. Magic? Kyle muttered to himself. It was as if he had been switched to another empty space. This strange scene that had suddenly occurred did not make him feel panicked. Panic was meaningless. The more uncontrollable the situation, the more calmly he had to think and face it. As expected of the youngest major general since the founding of the UA. An emotionless and neutral female voice lightly came from behind him. Kale calmly turned around and saw that the speaker was a young bald woman wearing a plain white robe. General Kale. Allow me to briefly introduce myself. My name is Alpha Centauri, a mage. Chapter 86. On the dead and empty streets of New York, the two were about 10 meters away from each other as they looked at each other. Alpha Centauri? After hearing the young woman's self-introduction, Kale's face was still cold and expressionless, but his heart was in turmoil. His muscles couldn't help but tighten as he entered an unprecedented state of high vigilance. The Ancient One, Marvel, the strongest person on Earth at this stage, an old woman who lived for hundreds of years, the supreme mage who spied on the truth of magic in the universe. Almost instinctively, the symbiotic venom on Kale's body was also very afraid. His suit, hat, and sunglasses changed at the same time. The black liquid twisted and transformed into a full-coverage dark night battle suit. The aura of slaughter and wildness filled the air. Alpha Centauri smiled and looked at Kale, who had entered combat mode. She said softly as if to comfort him, "General Kale, I mean no harm." "What did you do? Where is this?" Kale asked coldly as he looked around at the real and fake streets and buildings. "This is just the mirror dimension of Earth space. It's like a person looking into a mirror. It's the mirror world inside the mirror," Alpha Centauri explained. "Changing the dimension of space, this." Kale frowned. Although he had long known that the Ancient One could control time and space with magic, he only understood how terrifying it was when he experienced it himself. It was the first time he had lost control of the situation. He couldn't escape or fight. He could only wait for the other party to state her intentions. After all, people who didn't master the corresponding magic ability couldn't escape back to the real world even if they escaped to the end of the mirror world. And to fight with the Ancient One, Kale believed that even if some high-dimensional race who claimed to be gods came, they would be defeated by the woman in front of him in minutes. The strongest guardian of Earth, do you think it's a joke? I don't know why the Ancient One is looking for me. Kale took a deep breath and suppressed the strong uneasiness in his heart. I've wanted to see you for a long time. I just knew that you were free today, so I came directly. Alpha Centauri whispered softly. Her unhurried words seemed to have some magic, inexplicably dispelling the vigilance and uneasiness in others' hearts. See me? Kale froze for a moment. When did he attract this old woman's attention? Alpha Centauri stared at him and asked with a smile, "What did you do to the Tesseract?" Tesseract? Kyle was a little surprised and pondered over his words before replying, "I don't know if the mage is talking about the magic cube item used by the Hydra organization to create infinite energy. After I fished up the magic cube from the bottom of the battlefield, I directly transferred it back to the military base. It should now be in the research room of the U.S. military base." "Then have you seen something similar?" It's mainly inlaid with gemstones. Ancient One said. His left hand was still placed on his back, while his right palm was raised and flipped up, and a gem necklace appeared on his palm out of thin air. The necklace wrapped around her slender palm and hung down. At the bottom of the necklace was a metallic eye-shaped pendant. The eyeball was inlaid with an emerald that was glowing with a faint green light. What is this? Is this a magician's magic tool? It's actually glowing. Kale's expression didn't change as he retorted. In fact, the moment he saw the eye-shaped necklace, he knew that it was something extraordinary, the Eye of Agamotto, the Time Gem. Along with the space gem extracted from the core of the Tesseract, it was one of the 6 primordial stones of the universe. You've never seen a gem that glows inside? Alpha Centauri continued to ask. This time, Kale seemed a little impatient. He shook his head and said, "If I say I haven't seen it, then I haven't seen it. In the German armory, I've seen piles of gems, but I haven't seen anything like this." What he said was true. He had never seen a space gem before. After it was turned into a card, it had been placed in the card space and had never materialized. I understand. Alpha Centauri took a deep look at Kale. He flipped his right hand and the eye-shaped necklace disappeared into thin air. Kale looked regretfully at Alpha Centauri's empty hand and said, "I don't know if the Ancient One can give you a price for your magic tool. I have a friend who likes collecting rare treasures." This time, it was Alpha Centauri's turn to be stunned. He shook his head and said, "This thing is priceless. It only belongs to the fated." Then, am I considered a fated person? Why don't you give me that magic tool? Kale said, trying to push his luck. He now understood that Alpha Centauri had sensed that the space gem had disappeared from the Tesseract and had come to investigate. Indeed, as the Earth's guardian, he was kind-hearted. He would only take action against foreign invasions that threatened the foundation of Earth. There was no need for him to deal with a weak and ignorant war hero who defended his country. You're too murderous. You're definitely not a fated person. Alpha Centauri refused and turned around as if to leave. Kale was anxious. He quickly chased after him and urged him to stay. "Don't. Ancient One, it doesn't matter if you give me the magic tool or not. How about you teach me magic? Or, I'll treat you to a cup of tea on behalf of the country before you leave." Seeing that Kale was about to enter the 3-meter range of Alpha Centauri's back, Alpha Centauri waved his hand. Tiny sparks spun into a wheel and tore an exit in the space in front of him. Alpha Centauri took a step forward and stepped into the brilliant and wonderful ring of sparks. The white-robed figure quickly disappeared from it. Wait. Kale narrowed his eyes. He suddenly accelerated and quickly jumped out of the ring of sparks, on the bustling streets of New York. Fuck. An office worker carrying a briefcase and newspaper was in a hurry. Just as he looked down at his watch, a black shadow suddenly jumped out in front of him. He was so scared that he sat on the ground and the things in his hands spilled all over the ground. Who is it? The man in a suit looked up and cursed. When he saw the mysterious person wearing a familiar iconic night combat suit and looking around, his eyes subconsciously shifted to the New York Times spread on the road. The cover of the newspaper banner was a cold young man standing in front of the German presidential palace. The robust posture in the black combat suit was exactly the same as the person who suddenly appeared on the street in front of him. After a brief second of sluggishness, the man in a suit burst out with a squeal like a pig being slaughtered. "It's Major General Kale. The real person." Kale, who had just come out of the mirror world, had yet to react. After a brief electric shock of traveling through space, he was shocked to find that he had returned to the bustling streets of New York, surrounded by a dense crowd of pedestrians. When the man in a suit shouted, the sound of the entire street was silent. Countless pairs of surprised and fiery eyes focused on Kale at the intersection. This is bad. This was Kale's first thought. He also realized that he was now fully covered by the venom suit on the battlefield, his second thought was. Chapter 87. Is it really General Kale? In just a few seconds, there was a sensational uproar on the streets of New York. The passers-by around Kale, regardless of gender or age, all walked forward excitedly after seeing him, and soon formed an exaggerated tide of people, surging forward wave after wave. Damn Alpha Centauri, can't the location of the exit be more low-key? Kale gritted his teeth, and without any hesitation, he rushed directly to the commercial building on the side. With a super jump, he jumped directly to the signboard on the second floor of the commercial building. Climb, skill activated. He stepped directly on the wall above, and the soles of his feet seemed to be smeared with a layer of faint black light with a strong suction force. After stepping on the wall, he was firmly fixed to the wall of the building, so that walking on the wall was like walking on flat ground. A few simple jumps and sprints, and a set of retreat and escape movements were as smooth as flowing water. It took less than 3 seconds for Kale to successfully climb the 10-meter-high partitioned building of the commercial building, and he quickly disappeared under the cover of the wall. Only the crossroads below the commercial building were jammed with people and vehicles, and countless fanatical shouts resounded through the sky of New York City. Half a minute later, Kale, who was disguised as an office worker with venom again, walked on another street with lingering fear. At this time, many passers-by reacted, and they rushed to the direction he exposed just now. Even the police cars on the road were dispatched to maintain order. It's General Kale, he just appeared on the pedestrian street of the commercial building. Where is he? I want General Kale's signature. Get lost, General Kale is mine. General Kale's movements are too fast. I heard that he climbed up the 10-meter-high building and ran away. You heard wrong. My friend said that he jumped directly to the top of the commercial building and disappeared. Brother. The commercial building seems to be 100 meters high, but since it's General Kale, maybe he can really do it. Kale listened to the excited discussions of the passers-by, and he couldn't help but smile bitterly. The brim of the hat on his head was almost pressed down to his sunglasses. In this era where there were almost no idols and stars, as the first superhero and the symbol of national conquest and strength during World War II, the fanaticism of the people had reached an unprecedented level. There are pros and cons. Kale touched his chin. At first, he just wanted to establish a foothold in this Marvel world, make a career, and then slowly think about how to deal with future enemies. Now it seems that the reputation of this superhero is a little too much, he can't keep a low profile at all. When World War II is over, it's time to consider the retirement of heroes. Otherwise, even if it's a private move, it will attract the attention of various organizations all over the world. Kyle thought secretly, recalling the deep fear and powerlessness he felt when he faced Ancient One just now. Alpha Centauri, it shouldn't be that simple. Believe me, I can't easily take it out of the card space before I get the technique to master the space gem. In addition, I must try to get the magic ability of the monks of Kamartaj, the forces created by Alpha Centauri. Kale secretly decided, his blue eyes flashed, and he strode away from the noisy street area behind him and walked toward the street where his home was located. At this time, Kamartaj, a hidden residence opened up in a building space. The bright sparks rotated into a wheel, revealing a circular space tunnel that could be walked through. Alpha Centauri stepped out with his hands behind his back. Ancient One. In the hall, a male black monk had been waiting for a long time, respectfully bowing to the returning Alpha Centauri. Alpha Centauri smiled and nodded. The black monk said with a little doubt, the mage hasn't left Kamartaj for nearly 100 years. This time it's difficult to go for a country's Major General. Major General Kale, he's not an ordinary person. Alpha Centauri faintly frowned and said softly, his body seems to have fused with a symbiotic life form from an alien planet. Even if I read his mind with magic, I can only hear the chaotic thoughts of the symbiotic life form. The black monk said sternly, alien life form? Do you need me to deal with it? No need. That symbiotic life form doesn't have enough ability to threaten Earth. Also, you have to know that we really need to be vigilant against the enemy. Alpha Centauri reminded him and then strolled out of the hall. Kale of the United States? If I have the chance to go to the United States, I must test him. The black monk muttered to himself and remembered the name in his heart. Alpha Centauri came to an underground library and put the Eye of Agamotto into a book-shaped storage box. Together with the taboo magic books, she placed it on the bookshelf and sealed it with a magic chain. There was also a strange thing about Kale that she didn't tell any of the mages. Anyone who looked back in time and thought back to the past and future of various timelines couldn't see anything related to Kale. That man seemed to have appeared in this world out of thin air. He disrupted all the trends of the original future and made the thousands of possibilities of the future blurry, making it difficult to think through and practice. Variable, this adjective from the East was the most appropriate to describe it. Is he a hero who saved the world of Earth, or a demon who destroyed everything in this world? Alpha Centauri sighed. As the guardian of Earth, except for the cosmic stone, there was once again something far beyond her control. Brooklyn, Highland Street. Kale didn't know what Alpha Centauri was thinking. He went all the way to the original residence on the file and finally stopped in front of a classic duplex villa. If I remember correctly, this should be it. Kale looked up. It was the first time he came home. After confirming the house number, he pressed the doorbell next to the door. Coming, coming. From behind the door of the villa, a girl's crisp response came faintly. After a while, Lucy, who was dressed as a homely girl, opened the door a crack. Her bright amber eyes looked at Kale standing outside the door. After all, during the war, there were fewer young people who left home to join the army in New York. There were more single girls and young women. Beautiful women would have a certain degree of vigilance against strange men. Not to mention Lucy, who was as beautiful as an angel. During this time, some old gentleman had asked her where she lived. God knows what they wanted to do. Who are you? The fresh milk has been delivered during the day, and I didn't subscribe to the newspaper. Lucy asked, cautiously looking at the suspicious young man outside the door. He was dressed in a hat and sunglasses. Chapter 88. Lucy's delicate and lovely face turned pale, and her eyes became more vigilant as she stared at Kale, who was dressed strangely outside the door. She bit her lip and said, "You've got the wrong place. I didn't call for any door-to-door service." "Of course, I didn't find the wrong place. Isn't this 199 Highland Street? I also know that your name is Lucy Jane." Kale shrugged and smiled as he was about to enter the house. But just as he took a step forward, the wooden door in front of him was quickly closed by Lucy from inside. Kale was speechless for a while. He could still hear the click of the front door lock from inside the house, followed by Lucy's warning words, "My house is not far from the police station. Strange uncle, if you continue to stay outside and harass me, the police will come and arrest you." Kale smiled bitterly and explained that, "Lucy, I was just joking." "Bad guy, go away." Lucy snorted coldly. Kale continued to explain helplessly, "It's me, Kale. Listen carefully, I haven't seen you for a few months, and you even forgot my voice." "Kale?" Lucy exclaimed inside the house. After a hurried unlocking sound, the wooden door opened a gap again, and her amber-like eyes once again looked at Kale outside the door. This time, Kale didn't do anything funny. He had already asked Venom to remove the disguise of the hat and sunglasses, revealing his young and handsome face. "Kale. It's really you, you're back?" Lucy was pleasantly surprised. She quickly opened the wooden door, opened her hands and rushed forward excitedly. Her skirt fluttered as she threw herself into Kale's arms. "I haven't seen you for a few months, how have you been?" Kale maintained his smile, hugged Lucy's slender and soft waist, and looked down at the person in his arms. After not seeing her for half a year, Lucy was also 17 years old, and she looked more and more beautiful. Her long blonde hair was tied up high, and the facial features of her pretty face were delicate and impeccable. Especially the amber sky-blue eyes, they were cute and playful in the blink of an eye. Not only is her appearance more beautiful, but even her figure has become a lot fuller. Sure enough, a girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood, Cale sighed. Although he didn't confirm it visually, the soft feeling when he hugged her was not as thin and weak as before. No wonder she was so cautious. It's really not safe for a beautiful girl who had just grown up. Today's newspaper said that you returned to the New York military base last night. I was wondering if you would come back and was afraid that the room was dirty, so. Lucy said softly. She raised her head and looked directly at Kyle with her beautiful eyes. Her hands didn't have the slightest intention of letting go. She was wearing a long dress that wrapped around her legs and a beige apron on her perky chest. It was obvious that she had been cleaning the house. On the battlefield in Germany, I even slept casually in an open-air tent. No matter how dirty the room is, it's still better than a tent. Cale smiled and blinked. It's not good for us to be seen standing in front of the door like this. Why don't we go inside first? If people knew that his home was here, there would probably be people filling up the entire street every day. I won't let go. Just take me inside, Lucy said bravely. Like a Persian cat, she leaned tightly in Cale's arms. I can't do anything about you. Cale shook his head lovingly. He held the girls but with one hand and carried her into the house. Lucy buried her entire body in his arms. Inside the villa, the walls, the floor, and the furniture were all neat and tidy as if they were new. Lucy renovated the original guest room into her own room. Although Cale's original room was still empty, it also seemed to be carefully cleaned every day. There were no signs of it being empty for a long time. Cale returned to his room first, took off the Venom suit that was the third wheel, and put on a casual suit that was customized later. After all, the original body had been genetically modified by the super soldier, and his body had reached the perfect human physique. His previous clothes were no longer suitable. In the hall on the first floor, the fireplace was crackling and swaying. The Christmas tree decorated with lights had not yet been removed. There were fresh vases and fruit plates on the table, and a pile of black and white newspapers and papers were piled up in a small box next to it. Cale, who went downstairs, sat on the sofa and picked up a few newspapers from the box with slight surprise. He glanced at them briefly. They were all newspapers about his photos and reports. They were carefully cut and pasted and sealed with a film. Ah, don't look at that. A girl's panicked exclamation suddenly came from upstairs. Lucy, who had changed into a simple white dress, ran down the stairs with quick steps. Her pretty face was flushed. She grabbed the newspaper cut from Cale's hand and put it back into the box to seal it. She explained, I read this when I was bored. Only from this can I know your situation on the battlefield. Cale's heart warmed. He patted the sofa next to him and said with a smile, Come here and tell me how you're living in New York. It's very boring. Lucy pouted her pink lips and boldly sat on Cale's lap. The back of her head rested on his broad chest as she talked about some trivial and messy daily life after coming to New York in the past few months. There's a very scary big dog in the yard next door. Every time I pass by it when I go to the market or shop, it roars at me fiercely. Sometimes I'd rather take a detour. Some old men who know that I live here often come to harass me, but fortunately, Officer Joseph has asked the nearby police station for help. From time to time, the police will come to patrol this area and arrest or chase away those bad people. She spoke in great detail and with the innocence and gentleness of a young girl. Even an ordinary small matter would be divided into the length of a fable. However, Cale didn't have a trace of impatience. Instead, he listened attentively. He was even more attentive than when he listened to General Chester and Fry explain the situation on the front lines at the military base. It had been a long time since he'd experienced the fear, worry, and vulnerability that normal humans were used to since he'd obtained the super soldier ability. Cale lowered his head and looked at the beautiful girl in his arms. Her beautiful face was overflowing with happiness. He suddenly realized something. In this Marvel world, perhaps everyone, including Logan, Fry, and Steve, who were comrades that he could entrust his life with, would be able to bear the pain and give up in an absolute crisis. Only Lucy couldn't be easily given up. Because only Lucy could let him find his feelings as a human being, instead of a cold-blooded life that blindly wanted to become stronger and evolve. Compared to the fierce dog next door, I prefer the kitten, Lucy was still muttering. Cale took a deep breath and interrupted her. Lucy, listen to me first. Lucy turned around in surprise and looked into his eyes at close range. Chapter 89. The hall of the villa instantly quieted down. It was so quiet that only the crackling of the fire in the fireplace could be heard. Lucy opened her eyes wide in disbelief. Her clear blue eyes reflected Cale's face close to hers. Her pretty face was a lot redder because of excitement and shyness. What did you say just now? I didn't hear it clearly. Her voice trembled a little. Anticipation, nervousness, joy, and other complex emotions intertwined. I said. Cale had just opened his mouth, but before he could finish his sentence, the girl in his arms suddenly interrupted him. Wait a minute. Oh my God, this isn't a dream, right? Lucy ignored herself and cupped her cheeks with her hands. Her body temperature was obviously a lot hotter. She muttered to herself, the scene of you suddenly coming back today is exactly the same as the opening of the sweet dreams I've been having recently. And now you're telling me that again. Cale, I'm not really dreaming, am I? Why don't you hit me? After Lucy finished speaking, she looked at Cale a little worriedly. Of course this isn't a dream. Cale shrugged helplessly. With his current inhuman strength, how could he hit Lucy? He could only stretch out a finger and control his strength to lightly flick the girl's smooth forehead. Ah! Lucy held her forehead in pain, but her face was filled with a particularly bright smile. Her delicate body flipped in a circle and her hands intimately wrapped around Cale's neck. She looked at him face to face. Ask that question again. Cale nodded. I asked if you're willing to be my family. Is there a need to ask? Of course I'm willing. 1,000 times, 10,000 times I'm willing. Lucy answered excitedly. She couldn't hold back her emotions and started sobbing. Tears overflowed from her amber-like eyes and streaked across her fair and delicate face. After she lost her family, she had been living in Cale's house and looked forward to it every day. Now, these words that were like a promise made her know that all the waiting was worth it. I plan to create a family called Carl and cultivate a private force. If you join us, then you will be my family. I will use my strength to protect you. Cale said with a smile, wiping away the tears on Lucy's face. With tears in her eyes, Lucy asked softly, then I agree. Will I be the first to join the family? This. Of course. Cale reacted quickly and nodded. Logan was still doing the family test mission, so he could barely be considered half a member. Lucy tilted her head and plucked up her courage to ask, when are we getting married? You're only 17 years old, and you want to get married so soon? At least wait a few more years. When Cale said this, he couldn't help but smile. Did this count as him picking up a child bride from the battlefield? I'm not young anymore. When Lucy heard this, she puffed up her chest angrily. The chest of her dress showed a slight curve, and it pressed down softly on Cale's broad chest. The high curve gradually changed shape. Little vixen. Cale smiled bitterly. As if he thought of something, he said to Lucy, "Close your eyes for 3 minutes. No matter what happens, don't open them." Lucy nodded and quickly closed her eyes. Her beautiful eyelashes trembled slightly, and her angelic face seemed to be waiting for something. Kale waved his hand and picked out 3 cards from the card space. All of them had a blue quality luster, and they were suspended in the air above the hall on the first floor. The first card was classified as an ability, Add Life, card, so it could only condense into a translucent illusory card in the outside world. This is the blessing of 30 years of natural life. I hope you will be healthy and can stay by my side for a long time. Under Kale's thoughts, the Add Life card was used to consume the girl's body, and it had an immediate effect. Lucy's delicate body trembled slightly. The Add Life card indirectly had the effect of fine-tuning her physique. Her vitality had also increased by a lot, and her body felt more comfortable and energetic. Kale reached out and took the second card. It was an item card, and it quickly turned from a card to a physical object in his palm. The object had a luxurious and dazzling gem luster. It was a heart-shaped sapphire necklace, exquisite and perfect like the most expensive and luxurious handicraft. Girls should like this kind of thing, Kale muttered in his heart as he put the sapphire necklace on Lucy's fair neck. No matter how precious the heart of the ocean was, it was just one of his many riches. There was also the last and third creature card, Fairy's Protection. Kale's heart moved slightly. With Lucy as the target, he used this one-time mysterious creature card. The next moment, as the card was spinning and disintegrating, the space was slightly distorted and a small figure with wings flew out of the vortex. The half-real half-illusory creature that looked like a fairy moved its little mouth, as if it was chanting an inaudible spell. A ray of natural light shone on the back of Lucy, who had her eyes closed. What is going to happen? Kale looked at all of this in surprise. However, very quickly, the natural light gradually dimmed, and the little fairy creature's shadow also faded faintly, disappearing together with the small spatial vortex in the hall on the first floor. The silence in the hall dimmed and returned to its original state. Is that all? Kale frowned. What was that fairy creature just now? Could it be related to the higher dimensional races on Earth where the Asgard divine realm was located? Kale, 3 minutes have passed. Can I open my eyes now? Lucy said softly and tried to open her eyes. When she saw the heart of the ocean necklace she was wearing, her little mouth opened wide in surprise. Isn't this too expensive? It's just a gem necklace. I don't see you wearing anything else. You can wear this to some banquets in the future. Kale touched Lucy's head and asked, when you closed your eyes, did you feel anything strange in your body? Strange? There was a slight electric shock, but my heart was beating too fast when I was beside you, so I couldn't react. Lucy answered straightforwardly. Fairy's protection, the gift of nature. Just a ray of natural light special effect was gone. Kale secretly complained. When did this blue quality card become so useless? It was even a one-time creature card. Oh right, I've been so focused on chatting with you that I forgot to buy the ingredients for lunch. Lucy touched her deflated stomach. That's easy. Let's go out and eat. Kale suggested. It seemed that the one thing he didn't lack now was money. After Lucy kept the heart of the ocean, the two of them put on their clothes and went out. When they opened the main door, they found that it was drizzling outside. I'll go get an umbrella. Lucy looked up at the gloomy sky and was about to go into the house to get an umbrella. The next moment, the rain stopped without warning. A cool breeze blew, and the gloomy clouds drifted away. The rain cleared up, revealing the sunshine and rainbows. Was this a coincidence? Chapter 90. Walking along High Lawn Street, Lucy snuggled up to Kale's arm. The two of them looked like an ordinary couple strolling leisurely. Kyle's attire was back to how it was before. He wore a windbreaker, a hat, and a pair of sunglasses. Before Lucy went out, she even pinned a scarf on him. His appearance and body were covered up tightly, making him look a lot more bloated. Was it a coincidence just now, or the so-called elven blessing had a subtle effect? Cale pondered as he walked, his eyes quietly falling on Lucy beside him through the sunglasses. In his and Venom's perception, Lucy's vitality was a lot more vigorous due to the life-enhancing card, but her body was not much different from an ordinary person's. Ah! Lucy suddenly exclaimed, slightly panicking as she hid behind Cale. Cale quickly followed her gaze, only to see a large furry black dog constantly scurrying in the courtyard of a house by the road ahead. "Is that the dog?" Cale asked. "Yes, every time I pass by here, it would cling to the fence and yell at me." Lucy frowned her delicate thin eyebrows, cutely sticking out her pink tongue in that direction, "But this time you're here, so I don't have to be afraid of it." Cale's heart skipped a beat, and he brought Lucy closer, saying coldly, "Let's go, I'll take you to teach it a lesson." "There's no need," Lucy said worriedly. Under her pure and kind nature, she was worried about the big dog. But Cale's attitude was firm, and he took her to the front of the courtyard. As soon as the two of them approached the fence, the vicious dog in the courtyard was keenly aware of it, and it barked fiercely, showing its ferocious fangs as it rushed over in a hurry. "It's coming." Lucy closed her eyes in panic, tightly throwing herself into Cale's arms. Seeing that the vicious dog was about to pounce on the iron fence, it seemed to have seen something and suddenly stopped. The vicious dog's pair of beast eyes stared straight at Lucy, its ferocious and distorted face gradually softening, and the sound of the dog's barking was also weak, and finally it began to shake its slightly shedding tail vigorously. Just what happened? Cale didn't know what was going on, but in his keen perception, the hostility of the vicious dog was quickly declining until it dissipated, and was replaced by goodwill. Lucy opened her beautiful eyes and saw the big black dog barking and wagging its tail at her from the fence. She was also shocked speechless. She paused, hesitantly raised her left hand, and reached through the gap of the iron fence. "Lucy?" Cale was surprised, but the next moment, the vicious dog didn't resist at all, and docilely lowered its head, letting Lucy stroke the hair on its head. "Unbelievable!" Lucy said in surprise, "I can feel from the bottom of my heart that it is full of kindness to me, and it won't hurt me," and, she took a deep breath, and said to the vicious dog in the fence, "Little Black, roll over." The big black dog seemed to understand the command, and directly lay down on the grass in the yard, showing its belly and rolling a few times, then got up and shook its tail vigorously, asking for praise. "Cale, since when did dogs know how to judge the situation?" He focused his mind on Lucy, and then he was surprised to find that a dim blue ability card was hidden behind the girl's head. "Nature's gift, has the gift and blessing of nature." Blue ability card. Only creatures with a pure nature, after being blessed by the mysterious fairy, will receive the gift and blessing of nature in the universe. The blessed person has a natural affinity, and all low-level animals will have a good impression of them, and even listen to their orders. Passive activation of nature's blessing. No natural disaster can hurt the blessed person. Cooldown time is 6 hours. Current status, given card, unable to draw. The card owner can take the initiative to damage it. Is it damaged? "I see," Cale muttered to himself, and couldn't help but show a satisfied smile on his face. Ability cards of blue grade and above could only be given to the same person once. Therefore, he didn't give the blue ability card, Super Agent, to Lucy. After all, in this way, even if a better ability card is drawn in the future, it can't be given to Lucy, who has lost the qualification. He didn't expect that the one-time, Fairy's Protection, creature card was equivalent to summoning a fairy, giving it the nature ability of protection, which was an unexpected surprise. Lucy played with the vicious dog, and then remembered that the two of them were on the way to lunch, and couldn't help but hold Cale's arm and urged, "Let's go eat lunch quickly." "Okay." Cale nodded, and continued to take Lucy to a hotel restaurant. He originally thought that he would have to ask Howard to send bodyguards to secretly protect Lucy's safety. Now that Lucy has the passive ability of the fairy's protection, he didn't need to do that anymore. There were many creature cards stored in the card space, and when the time comes, he could release some of them and arrange them in various areas and corners of the entire High Lawn Street. Among them, there were highly dangerous animals such as vicious dog, poisonous snake, wasp, and so on. Kale believed that if someone dared to plot against Lucy, they would probably die on the street the next day, and they wouldn't even know how they died. This was his ability and means. When the 3 types of cards in the card space, regardless of number or grade, reached a certain level, Kale might really be able to call himself omnipotent. Brooklyn, New York, the 58th floor of the Henry Hotel, the only 5-star restaurant in the neighborhood. Kale and Lucy sat on a double seat by the window, and the gauze curtain on the side blocked the dazzling sun outside. The warm light from the ceiling of the restaurant was warm and pleasant, and soft music flowed slowly in the luxurious restaurant. Under the floor, there was a red carpet scattered with rose petals, and on the dining table, exquisite silverware was neatly arranged. The cost of a meal here started from hundreds of dollars, and the people who came to eat here were basically rich people. Therefore, although more than a dozen double tables were filled with guests, they were eating very politely and quietly. 2 guests, please order. A beautiful receptionist wearing a gorgeous reception uniform came to the table, and looked at Kale, who was still dressed up with surprise. Although the weather outside was still cold, it was the first time she saw someone who came to such a high-end restaurant and dressed so ungentlemanly. When the receptionist's gaze fell on Lucy in a white tube-top dress, even she couldn't help but feel amazed. She didn't dare to look any more and quickly handed over the menu in her hand, and politely stood to the side to wait. "Mr. K, isn't the cost of the meal here too expensive?" Lucy looked at the menu and said worriedly, almost letting the word "Kale" slip out. Kale raised his sunglasses with his finger, and glanced at the menu. The overall price of the dishes on the menu was much cheaper than the place Howard took him to, and said, "Expensive? It's quite cheap." The receptionist on the side trembled, and there was only one thought in her mind. Chapter 91. The waitress gave an awkward but polite smile and said to Lucy, "This masked man is right. The dishes in our restaurant are famous in New York, and the prices are also very affordable." Masked man? Kale blushed with shame. However, he didn't even take off his hat and sunglasses. It would be weird to eat indoors like this. He thought for a moment and asked, "Do you have a private room here?" "Private room?" The waitress was stunned for a moment and responded quickly, "I'm sorry. Although our restaurant has a few private rooms, they need to be booked a week in advance. Moreover, you need to be a VIP of the restaurant to make a reservation." "That's troublesome." Kale frowned slightly. "Alright, it's just lunch. As long as you can eat your fill, it's fine," Lucy said in a soft and considerate voice. The waitress at the side was speechless for a moment. Other guests came to eat in the atmosphere and mood, but these 2 guests came to a top-notch restaurant as if they were having a normal meal. She was a bit doubtful that the masked man at the table could pay for the final meal. Lucy ordered a simple steak, while Kale ordered a few more Western dishes and red wine. During this time, the waitress also specifically confirmed the name of each dish, afraid that he would misread the price. After the waitress left, Kale shrugged and took off the big hat on his head, revealing a brilliant and cool blonde hair. "Masked man." Lucy covered her mouth and snickered. Her smile made her eyes like crescent moons. Her already outstanding appearance was even more beautiful and moving. She attracted the gazes of the surrounding gentlemen who were eating. However, their partners snorted and reminded them to quickly retract their gazes. Kale said helplessly, "Look at you smiling. If you want to eat here in the future, I'll help you get a VIP card. You can come here often." "No way." Lucy firmly refused. If it weren't for the fact that she didn't buy the ingredients in advance this time, she would have preferred to keep Kale in the house and not come out, so that they could enjoy the warm time alone together. If people knew that the person beside them was Kale himself, the elegant ladies in the restaurant would probably go crazy over him. They might even abandon their male companions to throw flirtatious glances at him. This was not an exaggeration by Lucy. Last year, Kale was far ahead of the second place, Steve Rogers, and was elected as the #1 American women's dream lover with 3 times the number of votes. And this year, in less than 4 months, Kale had already firmly occupied the top spot, successfully becoming the perfect man that New York girls and women wanted to have a one-night stand with the most. Lucy also had a small social circle. Some of her female friends would be the first to buy and show off all the promotional videos, magazines, and newspapers about Kale. One could imagine how charismatic Kale, a superhero, was in the American continent, especially in New York. While Kale and Lucy were waiting for the dishes to be served, a middle-aged man in a suit hurried into the dining hall and waved his hand to signal the musician to stop playing the violin. He walked to the center of the restaurant and immediately attracted the attention of many dining guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very sorry to disturb your meal." The middle-aged man bowed and apologized first, then said politely, "There is a major piece of information that affects the country in the urgent New York Times. Our restaurant will provide the newspaper for free. I hope you can read the latest information." "Boss Henry, you're too polite. What happened? Didn't Germany just lose the war? Our army returned victorious. This morning, I heard that someone saw General Kale on the street." "Really?" The guests whispered to each other. Boss Henry shook his head heavily and said to the guests, "See for yourself." After that, more than a dozen waiters each took a stack of newspapers and quickly distributed them to each guest. Kale also took the New York Times from the waiter. Under normal circumstances, a top restaurant would not easily disturb the guests while they were eating. It could only be said that the impact of this urgent news was too great during the war. The front page of the New York Times was a photo of German officials signing the surrender agreement with their heads bowed. This also showed that as the main warring state that started World War II, Germany would completely withdraw from World War II. The European battlefield was completely pacified. This was the fact that the dust had already settled. It did not surprise Kale, the biggest contributor to this battle. What caused the restaurant owner's face to be heavy was not this news. Kale then turned to the next page of the New York Times. The printing on the second page looked slightly rough and casual, like a temporary news report. On the black and white cover, a middle-aged man was lying in a hospital bed with his eyes closed forever. Around the bed, there were more than a dozen members of Parliament and General Chester standing by the bed, mourning with heavy faces. The headline of the news report was, "Franklin Rost suddenly passed away this morning at the age of 62, the longest-serving president." Seeing this, Kale was shocked. He finally understood why the restaurant owner's face was heavy and worried. At the most critical end of World War II, the death of a sitting president due to illness had a huge impact on the country and even the World War. The Second World War must end as soon as possible. If it drags on, I'm afraid there will be unforeseen events. Kale narrowed his eyes and found the key point of this news. When the Soviet Union was in the alliance, they sent super agents to cause trouble. Now that the US had to deal with the president's death, if the war continued, the situation of World War II might change again. Kale suddenly remembered that last night, when General Chester picked him up at the New York military base, he looked like he wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. "Kale." Lucy put down the newspaper in her hand and looked at Kale worriedly. "It's nothing." Kale smiled and said softly, "It's a bit of a pity. This rare leisure vacation hasn't even started and it's probably going to end soon." The return of the war hero to the army could stimulate the morale of the soldiers on the front line. It was also the last time he fulfilled his duty as a major general. More importantly, he had to speed up the end of World War II. Because of the continuation of the World War, Kale couldn't find any time. Only when the world returned to stability could he start to cultivate his family's power. Only when the war ended could all the plans for the future be prepared and expanded. "Miss, here's the steak you ordered. Please enjoy." The waitress put the steaming steak on the table. Lucy bit her lower lip and felt that she had lost interest and appetite. Chapter 92. Kale and Lucy returned home after finishing their lunch at the restaurant. When they passed by the yard where the hound had been, Kale saw that the big black dog seemed to have been frightened by something as it trembled and curled up in its kennel. Lucy, who was holding his hand, still seemed to have a lot on her mind and wasn't in the mood to pay attention to the hound. Along the way, Hylon Street was empty with not a single person in sight. Of course, they hadn't entered the mirror image world. It was more like a force had intervened and isolated this place. It wasn't until they were within 10 meters of his house that Kale narrowed his eyes as if he had sensed something. He patted Lucy's hands and stepped forward to block them. He said coldly, "Come out." As soon as his words fell, several dozen armed soldiers immediately walked out from behind cover and lined up neatly. They pointed their fingers at their temples and saluted Kale respectfully. "Greetings, Major General Kale." "Greetings, Major General's wife." The latter sentence was obviously addressed to Lucy, who was behind Kale. This made Lucy blush with embarrassment and she stuttered, not knowing what to say. "General Chester asked you guys to come and give me orders, but there's no need for so many people to come, right? He even used military force to isolate this entire street." Kale looked at them with slight surprise. The fully armed soldiers didn't respond. They all turned around in a symmetrical formation and held their rifles, maintaining vigilance as they opened up a path in the middle of the army. Not far behind this armed army, 3 camouflage-armored military vehicles stopped on the road. Under the protection of another group of armed soldiers, a middle-aged man with 5 stars on his shoulder and a general's uniform got off the vehicle and walked over in a swift and decisive manner. No wonder there was such a large lineup and extravagance. It was a 5-star general. Kale casually waved his hand in greeting and asked, "General Chester, why have you come personally? Isn't it all for you?" General Chester glared at Kale. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his face was pale and haggard, as if he hadn't slept all night. "You're the one who gave me the holidays. It's only the first day and you're already here." Kale shrugged helplessly. General Chester said with a heavy expression, "The situation has changed. You already know about what happened this morning, right?" "Got it." Kale nodded. He looked around and suggested, "It's not good to discuss it here. Why don't you come to my house?" "All right." General Chester agreed and said to the soldiers beside him, "Just stand guard outside the house." "Got it." The armed soldiers replied in unison. They also believed that with Major General Kale around, there was no need for their protection. In the hall on the first floor of the villa, Lucy was very considerate. She went back to her room on the second floor alone and made the hall spacious enough for Kale and General Chester to talk. The president's situation actually had a premonition last night. After a night of emergency treatment, we still couldn't save his life. General Chester said sadly. Rost, who had been the President of the United States for 3 consecutive terms, had recommended him to become the first 5-star general in history. The two were friends who understood each other and trusted each other. If a president suddenly dies during his term, it will have a huge impact on the country and even the war situation. The most important thing right now is to choose a new president. Kale said. General Chester lightly shook his head and said coldly, "Of course, choosing a new president is a must, but that's the responsibility of the officials. Our military needs to think about how to end this Second World War as soon as possible." "You came to find me in such a rush because you want to send me to the Asia war zone?" Kale asked directly. Now that Germany had signed the surrender agreement in advance, the European theater of operations was completely stabilized. Only the Asian theater of operations still had a stubborn main country clenching its teeth and holding on. Ri sang, Ben. That's right. You should know about the Pearl Harbor incident that caused our army to suffer heavy casualties. No matter if it's for justice or for the sake of the people, Nissan is our #1 enemy. Hence, in these 2 years, we have invested more and more naval forces into the Asia war zone. Our army wants to slowly take over Nissan's coastal islands and finally attack Nissan. General Chester sighed as he said this. Cale naturally knew the reason why this 5-star general sighed. The United States Navy had always wanted to attack Nissan's mainland. However, just landing on the various islands in the Nissan coastal region was met with huge resistance from the Japanese army. Large and small battles continued on Nissan's coastal islands. However, the large-scale naval forces were unable to break through, much less attack their mainland. The army on Nissan's side. They worship the way of the Bushido and the spirit of the military. Every soldier seems to have been brainwashed, and when they fight, they don't care about their lives. Although our soldiers are well equipped and have the advantage in numbers, when we fight against those crazy Japanese soldiers, we win every time. General Chester sighed. You want me to go over and lead the army to attack Nissan's mainland? Cale asked straightforwardly. He didn't care about the way of the Bushido. In front of him, there was only the difference between a normal human and a superhero. However, General Chester shook his head. Cale asked again, You don't believe me? This time, General Chester smiled and looked straight at Cale. Your strength has been recognized by Germany. It's the true symbol of the country's conquering and strength. He changed the topic and expressed his own concerns, but even though you are strong, our soldiers can't take it. With you leading, I believe that within a few months, we will be able to take down Nissan and force them to surrender. However, after this battle, our army will also have to pay a heavy price. Cale thought for a moment. If that's the case, the Soviet Union might have other ideas. Right now, we and our allies are balancing each other. No one can afford to lose too much. General Chester nodded. Then what mission do you want me to carry out? Cale was getting more and more curious. General Chester's eyes were complicated. He asked, What if I ask you to go to Tokyo, Nissan alone to assassinate the emperor? Crack. The sound of a cup breaking came from Lucy's room on the 2nd floor. General Chester didn't care about it. He stared at Cale with his majestic eyes. Cale smiled faintly. I see, he paused and said, If you dare to send me, I will go. As expected of a super soldier. General Chester hesitated and said, I will also announce to the public in advance that I am sending you to Tokyo to carry out the mission of assassinating the emperor. Cale smiled and said, I understand. Assassinating the emperor is just a pretense. You want me to go into Nissan alone to create pressure and crisis and force them to surrender as soon as possible. If he failed, they would only lose a war hero. If he succeeded, they wouldn't lose the military power of the United States in exchange for long-term world peace. Chapter 93. The living room on the 1st floor of the villa was quiet. The atmosphere was tense and tense. Cale and General Chester looked at each other for a moment. Both of them had their own thoughts and ideals. At this moment, something that was originally connected as one finally showed some cracks. General Chester valued the military's strength more than anything else. Even if it put Cale and himself in danger, he would still agree to this decision. Major General Cale, please consider it carefully. General Chester explained slowly, This is not a plan I came up with. This is the best plan that all the generals and officials discussed together this morning. For them, of course, it was the best plan. Cale, who was leaning on the sofa, had a cold expression as he fell into deep thought. General Chester comforted him, Don't worry. After you go to Tokyo, I will send armed soldiers to High Lawn Street to protect your family's safety. At the same time, they would also monitor and control him. Kale narrowed his eyes and put his hands on the back of the sofa. His tone was cold. No problem, I accept this mission. Kale. General Chester was about to say something when Kale interrupted him. Sir, Lucy and I are about to take a nap. Can you please leave? The obvious estrangement made General Chester's face stiffen. He took a deep breath and said, Then I'll leave everything to you. The soldiers I brought will be stationed here. When it's time to leave in 2 days, there will be a car to pick you up and take you to the base airport. Take care, I won't see you out. Kale said coldly. General Chester didn't mind. He slowly got up from the sofa and walked out the front door. He stopped at the door and looked up at the blue sky and white clouds outside. He suddenly had the urge to turn around and make up for it. However, his rationality soon won over his emotions and he firmly walked out. Kale, who was sitting on the sofa, was silent. His hand grabbed the air and a white item card was pulled out from the storage area of the card space. It materialized into a Major General's badge that represented glory. Kale didn't even look at the badge and threw it into the trash can. That afternoon, while General Chester, a 5-star general of the U.S. Empire, was mourning and sending off the president's body in front of the White House, he also released an important military message to the media on behalf of the military. Major General Kale, who represented the country's strength, was a super war hero. He would be sent to Tokyo, Nissan in the Asia Theater alone to carry out the mission of killing the supreme leader, the Emperor of Japan. When this news was released, the entire country was shocked. The citizens of the United States of America were skeptical about this. Although Kyle's individual strength was unquestionable, sending him to the enemy country alone to kill a leader was undoubtedly an extreme suicide mission. However, on the podium, General Chester clearly stated that Major General Kale had already agreed and accepted this important mission. He said that Kale had the ability and confidence to complete the order, which made the protesting citizens and soldiers speechless. That night, the news quickly spread to the entire world through various channels. It was as if an earthquake had struck the entire world. The entire world was in an uproar. After careful analysis and judgment, any country would think that this single soldier dispatch mission was no longer difficult. It could only be said that it was the result of the U.S. military's momentary insanity and Major General Kyle's personal arrogance. In the Asia Theater where the flames of war were still raging, Nissan's upper echelons were all ashamed and angry when they heard this news. In their view, the U.S. had sent a large number of ships to invade their own coastal islands in the past few years and had never gained the upper hand. This time, they were actually shameless enough to send an agent to threaten the great Emperor of Japan. One man against an entire country? What kind of joke was this? The next morning, the Emperor of Nissan gave a domineering speech at the Tokyo Emperor's mansion. We warmly welcome Major General Kale of the U.S. Empire to play in Tokyo, Nissan. When the time comes, our soldiers will teach him some of the essence of Bushido. Before Kale even went out, the two countries were already separated by a vast ocean. The smell of gunpowder was extremely strong. Germany, which had already surrendered, was the country that understood Kale the most. As a bystander, they hoped that Nissan could take revenge for them. On the other hand, they had an inexplicable gaze of sympathy. The US allies like the Soviet Union and the UK watched coldly from the side. They didn't know what the US military and Kale were up to, so they didn't dare to come to a conclusion easily. This was the most unbelievable individual assassination mission in history. Kale's name also officially spread throughout the world. No matter if he was a shooting star that streaked across the night sky or a sun that hung in the universe, he was the most dazzling hero during World War II. New York's main military base, inside the office of the highest commander. The correspondent walked to the door and looked at General Chester, who was sitting on the office chair. He reported with a salute, "Report." Captain Fry Nicholas wishes to see you. Captain Fry. General Chester thought for a moment and nodded. Let him in. The correspondent retreated outside the door. The next moment, Fry, who was wearing a neat military uniform, hurried into the office. What's wrong? As a captain who won the Best Commander award last year, why are you so impatient? General Chester said softly. It's because I'm the best commander that I have a unique understanding of the analysis of the battle situation. Fry took a deep breath and said with a serious expression, General Chester, why did you let Major General Cale carry out such a high-risk mission alone? If Major General Cale and I lead the army, just like the last large-scale battle, we'll suppress Nissan in all aspects. The chances of victory will be higher. Captain. Are you questioning my orders? General Chester raised his head and looked at Fry with a dignified gaze. Fry gritted his teeth and said, I don't understand. Please give me an answer, sir. I know. You and Major General Cale have always been comrades in arms. He was also the one who promoted you. General Chester softened his attitude and said softly, you have to understand that this was a joint decision made by all the American senators and generals. It's not something I can easily influence. I kind of understand now, Fry said with a smile, so, you're actually afraid of a hero who protects his country, Captain. Watch your words. General Chester warned coldly. Fry ignored him and continued, back then, it was you who personally promoted Cale to the altar of a war hero step by step. Now, you think he's too high, so high that you fear him. So, you want to take advantage of the later stages of the war to let him go to the enemy country to fend for himself. You all think you understand everything too well, so you use the name of patriotism to check and balance and doubt in all aspects. Actually, you don't understand Cale at all. He's an extremely difficult person to get close to, but once you do, he's extremely loyal. Moreover, the country's power that you value is worthless to him. Fry said this as if he was extremely disappointed in the military. He took off his officer's hat and the military badge on his left shoulder and solemnly placed them on the desk in the office. I, Fry Nicholas, hereby apply to the Supreme Commander to resign from the position of captain. Fury shrugged nonchalantly, turned around, and left the office. He said, Sir, I'm sorry. One day, you'll realize how stupid your decision is. You're forcing a superhero to leave. General Chester stared blankly at Fray's back as he left. Finally, he closed his eyes and sighed, holding his forehead with his hand. Chapter 94. Brooklyn, at the intersection of Highland Street. With Cale's villa as the center, there were police checkpoints and armed soldiers within a 50-meter radius outside the walls. Fry, who had taken off his military uniform and put on a windbreaker, was quickly stopped by 2 American soldiers at the outermost perimeter as soon as he approached the area. Sorry, unrelated personnel, please stop here. I'm Cale's comrade in arms. I want to see him. Fry approached and said in a deep voice. The 2 American soldiers looked at each other, then took off their protective helmets that covered even their faces. When Fry saw their faces, he opened his mouth in surprise. Why are you guys here? Long time no see. Since Captain Steve's plane crash and Major General Cale's disappearance for half a month, the Roaring Commandos have been completely disbanded. Our members have also been assigned to different units. Officer Fry, I didn't expect to see you here. The 2 armed soldiers looked at Fry with slight excitement. You guys. Fury sighed with emotion. He suddenly thought of something and frowned slightly. Why have you all gathered together now? Could it be that the ones guarding this place are all members of the original Howling Commandos? Yes. One of the soldiers nodded and said happily, it was General Chester's personal suggestion to reorganize us into an elite team. We will be under the direct command of the 5-star general for special missions. When Fry heard this, his tanned face couldn't help but turn cold. He said with anger, so you listened to General Chester's order to guard Major General Kale, who originally promoted you? Don't say that. The armed soldier waved his hand in a panic and corrected him. We're not guarding. This is just to protect the safety of Major General Kale's family. The other armed soldier agreed and said, that's right. We're using military force to close this place, mainly to prevent enemy agents from entering. We're also preventing the media from disturbing Major General Kale, who's about to go to war. I don't count as an enemy agent or the media. Fry said as he walked forward and was about to enter the area sealed off by the police line. He had just taken a step when he was stopped by the two armed soldiers. I'm very sorry, we can't let you in. Please cooperate. This is General Chester's order. No one is allowed to see Major General Kale for the next few days without his permission. Fry looked at his former comrades in front of him and quietly clenched his fists. He said coldly, what if I force my way in? Will you execute your mission and kill me? Of course not. Captain Fury, please don't make things difficult for us. The two armed soldiers looked troubled and didn't know what to do. You don't have to call me Captain. I've already resigned. Phrased decisively. I'm ashamed of you. If Captain Steve were still alive, he would definitely punch you in the face and wake you up. Calm. Inside the bathroom of a 3-story villa. Kale was wearing a pair of shorts, a white singlet, and slippers. He washed up without any worry. The faucet flowed with water. He used both hands to wash his face. Even his blonde bangs were wet. Kale took a deep breath. His handsome face gradually became serious. His previous lazy and casual aura was gone. He seemed to have returned to the battlefield, the invincible demon tyrant who dominated all wars. Let me think about what the first step should be. Oh right. Kale made a grabbing motion and pulled out a green item card from his card space. It materialized into a mobile phone with a keyboard. He dialed a series of numbers. In just 5 seconds, the call was connected. Howard's surprised and anxious voice came through. Is this Kale? Who else in the world can use wireless phones to communicate now except for you and me? Kale said with a chuckle. Fortunately, you took away the new mobile phone last time. Plus, we are all in the New York area. That's why we can communicate secretly. Howard laughed and continued solemnly, Fry came to me and told me some things about the higher-ups in the military. He paused and continued, as far as I know, when the president suddenly died the day before yesterday, a large number of people in New York proposed that you, a war hero, be selected as the first candidate. This should be the fuse that triggered the national parliamentarians and the military's higher-ups to discuss the mission. Those higher-ups only made the choice they thought was right when the situation turned, Kale said coldly. He was not surprised by this. Captain America, who could be injured, tired, and had a perfect human physique, was still within the scope of the understanding of the higher-ups in the United States. They thought they could firmly control him. In the battle against Germany, he showed that he could ignore gunfire, was not afraid of bombardment, and shocked tens of thousands of soldiers alone. This was far beyond the current understanding of the higher-ups in the United States. Their vision is still too low and too narrow. They are only limited to the surface of things in the world. It is normal for them to have scruples from the perspective of ordinary people, Kale said indifferently. This era was still too early. They had not experienced the 21st century, the birth of genetically mutated humans, Hulk, Spider-Man, etc., the collision of the light of technology, Iron Man, Black Panther, Ant-Man, etc., the transcendence of myths and magic, divine dominion, Thor, Doctor Strange, etc., the extra-dimensional races in the alien universe, Guardian of the Galaxy, Thanos' army, etc. It was still World War II on Earth. Humans were like frogs living in a well. They were full of awe of the unknown and full of fear of the strong. Most people thought that Kale, a powerful individual, would covet the water in the well. Little did they know that he had already climbed out of the well and was looking at the stars and the ocean outside. Standing on the top floor of the Stark Industries building, Howard clenched the phone in his hand and said angrily, "No matter what, you are a war hero. You are full of achievements and glory. No matter how afraid they are, they shouldn't threaten you to go to Nissan alone." Before he could finish speaking, Cale's words on the other side made him stagger and almost fall to the ground. "No, no, they didn't threaten me." Howard took a breath and asked in surprise, "What, they didn't threaten you? That is a very risky mission with no return. In this world, there are not many things that can threaten me. It just so happens that the upper echelons of the United States don't have those abilities." Cale smiled faintly and said, "Those old guys are all very smart. They are not naive enough to think of using armed forces and the orders of a 5-star general to force me. Otherwise, they wouldn't have let the soldiers of the original Roaring Commandos come over to guard it." "Then why did you agree?" On the other end of the phone, Howard was stunned. He still knew that the reorganization and promotion of the Roaring Commandos were not enough to move Cale. Go to Nissan and force them to surrender with the strength of one person and return the world to peace. I personally think it is worth a try. Chapter 95. What did you say? On the other end of the phone, for the first time in his life, Howard felt that his brain wasn't enough. To force Nissan, the powerful and rampant country of World War II, to surrender with the power of a single person, this was probably something that only the legendary gods could barely do. With the power of a mortal, side by side with the gods? "I can give it a try, it's not dangerous anyway," Cale said confidently. He was really considering this operation. Regardless of the proposal, it was an unrealistic semi-suicidal plan that the UA executives came up with out of fear. But in his opinion, this combat mission wasn't impossible. The Venom suit with gliding, camouflage, concealment, and other abilities, a variety of blue auxiliary skills and life-saving cards, and a strong physique far beyond that of ordinary humans, super soldier plus self-healing factor. Cale didn't think that going to Nissan alone was very dangerous. He had been hesitating before, and General Chester thought he was afraid, but he didn't know that he was really thinking about the feasibility of this plan. "Howard, didn't you say before that the nuclear weapons that will be completed in nearly a month will be enough to affect the World War? I don't think the threat I bring is much weaker than nuclear weapons." Cale smiled confidently and said to Howard on the other end of the phone, "World War II ended early, and the world returned to peace. This is also what I personally want to see. You might as well go to Nissan and give it a try." This wasn't for anyone, it was just that the chaos of World War II hindered his future prospects and steps. On the other end of the phone, Howard seemed to understand. After a long silence, he shook his head and sighed. "Cale, you really are something." The UA executives thought they had the situation under control and used various methods to persuade Cale to go to Nissan to carry out the mission, disguised as alienation and elimination. But from beginning to end, they ignored a premise, and that was, Cale's strength was far beyond their current apprehension. Cale's vision and intentions were also not what they expected. "Since you said so, then I'm relieved. Otherwise, I would have thought that you were going to be sent to Nissan without any preparation. That would have scared me." After Howard let out a sigh of relief, he said playfully, "I'm suddenly looking forward to it. If you succeed in ending the World War on your own and come back safe and sound, what kind of expression will the American leaders have?" He sighed and said, "If you succeed, you will become a god in one battle." In the future, he could rely on his personal prestige to stand at the peak of the United States, or even the entire world, and be respected by tens of thousands of people. "You know, I don't care about that." Cale chuckled and said in a serious tone, "But there are two things that I want to ask you for help with." "Just say it," Howard said straightforwardly. Knowing that his friend was not in danger, he felt a lot more at ease. "First thing. After I depart for Nissan, contact Logan and have him come over tonight to pick up Lucy and move her to a safe place," Cale said in a low voice. No matter what, his relationship with the military could not be returned to the past. The American soldiers, even the original members of the Roaring Commandos, were not trustworthy. "Okay, I'll inform Logan in time. But the soldiers guarding outside your house?" Howard hesitated and didn't continue his sentence. "Tell Logan not to kill them. Just teach them a lesson and knock them all out," Cale responded coldly. Those soldiers were only dragged over by the higher-ups of the United States to carry a debt of gratitude. No matter what, they could not be blamed. However, the members of the original Roaring Commandos had nothing to do with him since they accepted General Chester's orders in the past. They would be strangers in the future. "That's great." Howard breathed a sigh of relief and asked doubtfully, "What's the second thing?" "Ask Fry to secretly investigate which senior figures of the United States were the first to propose a mission against me." Cale pondered for a moment, and a murderous intent appeared in his blue eyes. "I suspect that there are spies of the Hydra organization among them." "Hydra organization?" Howard took a deep breath when he heard this. The remnants of the Hydra organization, after the Battle of the Alps underground base, paid the price of Captain America's crash and disappearance, and have not been uprooted. And there are spies infiltrating the higher-ups of the United States? The president just died suddenly, and you were secretly arranged so soon. I'm afraid that there are really remnants of the Hydra organization among those at the top. Their favorite thing is to sow discord. Howard said to himself, and he was terrified when he thought about it. If you want to completely annihilate the remnants of the Hydra organization, you have to find all the targets. Cale said, "Just let Fry investigate in secret. Don't alert the enemy. Wait for me to come back." Howard said calmly, "Okay, I know. You must be more careful. When you return in triumph, we'll drink all night. If you want to drink all night, then you have to practice your alcohol tolerance." Cale finally chuckled and teased, then hung up the phone and turned it into a card that disappeared from his hand. He turned around. He didn't know when Lucy was already standing behind him. Her big eyes were slightly red as she looked forward. "Don't worry, I've taken care of everything. Just wait for me to come back." Cale took Lucy's small hand, hugged the girl's soft body into his arms, and kissed her smooth white forehead. Lucy smiled slightly, opened her lips slightly, and said with certainty, "Okay, I'll wait for you." At this time, in the office of the acting Prime Minister of the United States, a middle-aged man with his hands in his trouser pockets paced back and forth uneasily in front of the window. His slender eyes were slightly narrowed, and no one knew what he was thinking. With a knock on the door, a sexy and mature female secretary walked in with a large box and muttered with red lips, "Senator Ivan. These are letters of suggestion sent by the people to the Senate Hall. Basically, they hope that members can reconsider and negotiate the mission arrangement for Major General Cale to go to Nissan. They're so annoying. This has already been unanimously decided by the high-level meeting. What's there to consider?" Ivan glanced at the secretary gloomily and said coldly, "Call General Chester and remind him to send that man out quickly. Don't delay any longer." "Yes." The female secretary put down the box full of letters in the corner. Her long black stockings kicked off her high heels and swayed her hips as she left the office. Cale. Major General of the United States, war hero, humph. Ivan snorted coldly and slammed his fist on the table. This war hasn't reached the end yet, and we can't say who will win or lose. When my master Schmidt returns, it will be time to unify the earth. Chapter 96. General Chester, the representatives called again to urge us. They said that the publicity on the surface was enough. It's time for Major General Cale to set off. In the Supreme Command office, General Chester stood by the window with his back to the door. After listening to the message from the soldier, he nodded solemnly. I understand. Then, let Captain Fry bring the convoy to pick him up. The communication soldier was stunned and reminded hesitantly, have you forgotten? Captain Fry resigned the day before yesterday, and it was you who approved it. He has already left the main base. I made a mistake. General Chester sighed tiredly and pulled himself together. He said majestically, send my special armed convoy to Hai Lan Street to pick him up. After picking him up, drive directly to the main base airport. After the car arrives, don't report to anyone. The transport plane must take off within 10 minutes. We must send Major General Kale safely to Tokyo Nissan. Yes, sir. I'll arrange it right away. The communication soldier accepted the order and left. The office quieted down again. After a long silence, General Chester's whisper finally sounded in the room. A hero if he succeeds, a hero if he fails. Half an hour later. 5 bulletproof armored vehicles stopped at the door of an ordinary villa. An elite army formed by dozens of armed soldiers stood neatly in a military posture. They faced the closed main door of the house, patiently and respectfully waiting for something. Creak, after a while, the door opened. A handsome young man with cool blonde hair, wearing a dark night battle suit, a one-handed sword on his back, and an energy pistol on his feet, slowly walked out. The moment his tall and straight figure appeared. The soldiers stationed outside the door, who were originally the Roaring Commandos, and the convoy soldiers who only obeyed the orders of the 5-star general, subconsciously straightened their backs. Their eyes were focused and serious, and they saluted loudly in unison. Hello, Major General Kale. The man in front of them was a superhero in the territory of the United States. In the eyes of any soldier, he was a benchmark, a symbol, and a legend. Kale glanced at them coldly and did not say anything. At this time, he was still in a single soldier's armor on the battlefield, but the one-piece battle suit no longer had the mark and badge of the United States military. This battle was not for the Americans, but for himself. Target, Tokyo. Kale's face was cold as he sat in the back seat of the armored vehicle in the middle. Soon, the 5 armored vehicles lined up in a row and drove toward the airport of the military base from the main road in a grandiose manner. On the second floor of the villa, Lucy pulled up the window curtains and watched reluctantly until the motorcade disappeared around the corner of the street. When the armed convoy left Hai Lan Street and successfully entered New York's main road, the scene on both sides of the road instantly changed. Unlike Hai Lan Street, which was deserted due to the blockade, the main road that passed through the bustling street was crowded with tens of thousands of people. Many of them held up homemade signs and shouted emotionally as they watched the armed convoy pass by. Some were urging them to stay, some were supporting them, and some were praying. Major General Kale. Even though the interior of the modified armored vehicle was bulletproof and soundproof, they could still vaguely hear the shouts of the people on the roadside outside. How did they know that I would depart today? Kale was stunned. He looked out through the protective window and saw countless people on both sides of the road. It was as if half of New York City's people had come to send him off. Not today, but one of these days. The driver was a little hesitant and said, since they knew that you were going to Nissan alone and that half of Hai Lan Street was blocked by military forces, the people have been waiting on the road from Hai Lan Street to the military base every morning and evening. Why do they have to do this? Kale was silent as he looked out. The main road was several miles long and passed through several bustling street crossings in New York. However, no matter how long or wide the area was, the sidewalk was filled with people full of anticipation and gratitude. They held up signs and shouted, almost rushing to justice. As a result, a large number of traffic police and police officers were needed every 10 meters. They used police cars and human walls as a protective belt to desperately suppress the exaggerated crowd. Major General Kale, please be sure to return triumphantly. Ahahaha, of course the general will teach the warriors of Nissan a lesson. When you return, the world will be peaceful, countless people shouted from the bottom of their hearts. This time, they did not blindly ask for help from the military. Instead, for the first time, they entrusted the grand wish of world peace to one person. As Kale watched and listened, he suddenly realized something: this might be the unique charm of superheroes. Heroes were beyond the rules and regulations of reality. Regardless of whether they met the rigid rules or not, as long as they did righteous acts, they would be loved and respected forever. Heroes could do what people could not, and could not do what people could. His every move would change the pattern of the world and attract the admiration of tens of thousands of people. To a certain extent, superheroes were really the epitome of God in this Marvel world. And God, no matter how much they prayed day and night, it would be useless. Superheroes, on the other hand, could do what people wanted. Unfortunately, I'm only thinking for myself. I don't want to be a superhero revered by tens of thousands of people, Kale whispered to himself, shrugged and closed his eyes, half lying on the soft back seat of the armored vehicle. It was not until the armed convoy drove away from the main road that the cheers of the people subsided. The driver did not dare to stay too long and accelerated the armored vehicle into the military base. The military personnel in the base were already prepared. They set up a police line protection so that the convoy could travel smoothly. They only stopped when they reached the base airport and handed them over to the transport fighter that was ready to set sail. Rather than arranging for personnel to go out for missions, it was more like holding prisoners hostage. Kale's face was slightly cold the whole time. He silently followed the itinerary and boarded the back cabin of the transport fighter under the protection of armed soldiers. A few minutes later, the new transport fighter made by the United States that could travel the furthest and highest distance carried the war hero Cale Adolph and officially took off from the New York military base of the United States. When the fighter disappeared into the high clouds, all the personnel in the New York military base stopped what they were doing and looked at the blue sky with empty hearts. At the same time, Senator Ivan, who received the message near the White House, secretly breathed a sigh of relief. After all, as long as Cale left and entered the enemy country Nissan, he would be half a step into the territory of victory. As for whether Cale could come back, he was not worried at all. Was there a need to ask? No matter how strong a person was, how could he fight against the power of a country? Ivan smiled triumphantly. He locked the office door, took out a telegraph from a safe, and typed out the code words. Chapter 97. Current altitude, 10,080 meters. Flight route normal. In the new transport aircraft, apart from the captain in the pilot's seat, only Cale was in the back seat. The cabin was so quiet that only the soft sounds of various instruments could be heard. Cale sat in his seat and closed his eyes to rest. His mind was in the card space, looking at the close to 1,000 cards in the ability card area. It was said that the poor relied on mutations, while the rich relied on technology. Now, regardless of whether it was mutations or technological items, he had them all. However, what he valued the most was his body's physique. His body was his capital. Cale's mind clone looked at the super soldier that was suspended in the middle of the ability card area. This rare blue physique type ability card drawn from Steve could be said to be the cornerstone that allowed his physique genes to surpass that of ordinary people. Super Soldier. This was a genetic modification ability that increased the potential of human physique in all aspects. At the beginning, it allowed a person's strength, speed, physique, and resistance to attacks to reach 4 to 5 times that of a normal person. At the peak of the physique, it could even reach the terrifying critical point of 10 times that of a normal person. 10 times that of a normal person, what kind of concept was that? The impact force of an ordinary adult's punch was on average 100 kilograms. 10 times the impact force would be 1 ton. With a punch of 1 ton, not to mention a human, even a bull would be knocked to the ground by his punch. The peak of the super soldier's ability was naturally not increased through the growth of age. Instead, it required a long period of continuous training to control and excavate the potential of one's physique. Steve had obtained the super soldier ability earlier than Kale. However, until the day he crashed, his body's potential was still in the initial stage of excavating. The value was only 5 to 6 times that of a normal person. After all, he had learned military boxing and practiced without rest and sleep. It took him 3 days to master it. This was already a very fast superhuman level. Kale, on the other hand, had the ability to draw cards. He only needed 3 seconds to master it from nothing. Requiring him to train for a long period of time? That was impossible. As long as he continued to draw from other people's white-green ability cards, he could accumulate all kinds of ability cards of the technique and physique cards and turn them into keys to quickly unlock the door of the super soldier's potential. During the last battle in Germany, Kale had drawn hundreds of green skill-type ability cards from Logan. After drawing them for himself, equivalent to half a century of training and cultivation, his constitution had finally reached the peak of the super soldier constitution. Self-healing factor, this blue physique-type ability card, perfectly maintained the peak level of his physique. It would not weaken due to age or the hidden injuries from long-term combat. Of course, the above was not the best combat state. Under the full coverage symbiotic effect with Venom, his overall physique value could still go up a small level. 12 times that of a human. Kale now had the confidence to climb to the top of the pyramid of known creatures on Earth with just his powerful physique alone. Major General Kale. The captain on the side of the pilot's seat reminded Kale, allowing him to return to reality. He opened his eyes in surprise. We are now over Nissan, and we will cross the border of Tokyo in 5 minutes. The captain said apologetically, because we are over the enemy's territory, the transport fighter can only be maintained at an altitude of more than 10,000 meters. You will need to parachute alone at this height later. The military has prepared protective clothing and oxygen tanks for you. Please wear them in advance. Just tell me when you reach your destination. Open the rear cabin first. Kale responded coldly. He did not take the protective clothing, oxygen tanks, or even the parachute bag. He stood up and walked to the rear cabin area. Under the control of the captain, at the tail of the small transport fighter, a steel deck in the rear cabin was lowered, revealing the night sky outside. The transport fighter crossed the ocean from New York to Nissan. Half a day had passed, from noon to late at night. Kale stood upright on the edge of the deck. The cold wind poured in and blew the blonde bangs on his forehead. At this height, it is already below 0 degrees, and there is a lack of oxygen at high altitude. You will die if you parachute without protective equipment, sir. The captain, who had brought the oxygen supply device in advance, warned loudly. He turned around in the pilot's seat. When he saw that Kale did not even carry an parachute bag, he was shocked speechless. I never carry a parachute. Kale shrugged coldly. The protection of the Venom suit made him unable to feel the slightest chill. As for the lack of oxygen, now he could hold his breath for more than 10 minutes of anaerobic exercise. The captain was hesitating when the fighter suddenly tilted due to the airflow. When he turned around and looked at the fighter's detection instrument, he seemed to have seen something terrible. His face turned pale in an instant, and he said to himself in horror, "How is this possible? What happened?" Kale asked coldly. The captain said in disbelief, 7 fighters have been detected, and they are approaching us at high speed. They have just arrived in the sky above Nissan. They haven't even landed yet, and they are already rushing over to entertain guests. Kale said with a chuckle. He suspected that there were spies among the senior officials of the American Empire, so it was not unexpected for them to install a GPS on the transport fighter and reveal the location to Nissan. Captain, you can go back directly. I wish you good luck. Kyle waved his hand behind him and leaped up. Just like that, he jumped 10,000 meters into the air. He was in the air, and the cold wind and airflow were blowing in his face. He looked left, right, up, and down, and the visibility within 100 meters was pitch black. Less than 5 seconds after he jumped out of the cabin, accompanied by a storm of intensive bombardment, there was a thunderous explosion above Kale's head. Boom! Kale turned around in the air and looked back. It was the transport fighter that he had just jumped out of being attacked. Most of the fuselage was burning fiercely, and it was collapsing while losing power and falling down. In the dark clouds within 100 meters, under the illumination of the flames on the fuselage of the fallen fighter, several Japanese fighter jets could be vaguely seen, shuttling back and forth at high speed, circling around. Whoosh! Kale, who was maintaining a natural fall, was confirming the position of the nearest target fighter. A single fighter jet with a spiral tail fin was about to sweep past him at a height of about 20 meters. "It's you." Kale's eyes were cold, and a pair of dark wings suddenly stretched out from the back of the Venom suit. His body suddenly stopped in the air, and then he naturally fell uncontrollably, gliding towards the fighter jet at high speed. Ta! Kale arrived above the head of the fighter jet, and with a slight movement of his wings, he squatted down and stood on the windshield of the single fighter jet. "Nanny?" The Japanese pilot was slightly stunned. He looked at the young man who suddenly smiled at him from outside the fighter jet and gasped in horror. This was an altitude of more than 10,000 meters. Was he a human or a ghost? Sir, this is Zidian 02. His teeth were chattering, and before he could finish his words, he saw the cold young man clenching his fists and extending 3 dark claws. Chi! Chapter 98. 10,000 meters in the night sky, which was above the cumulus clouds and below the ozone layer. This place seemed to be in another vast dimensional space. It was pitch black all around, and the wind in the sky howled incessantly. One of the transport fighters was severely damaged. The fuselage of the transport fighter burned into a ball of fire. It was like a small sun falling from the sky. However, not far from it, there was a single fighter that had lost control without anyone noticing. It spun with its head facing the ground and accelerated toward the clouds and the ground below. Successfully destroyed the target transport fighter. Circle down and search. Confirm if there are any enemies forced to land. Reporting. This is Zidian 02. Ah! A sudden scream rang out through the communication channel of the fighter jet squad. The next moment, it completely lost all sound and fell silent. The pilot of number 02? What happened on your side? The captain of the elite fighter squad frowned and asked into the walkie-talkie, "Please reply if you hear this." Number 02, please reply immediately if you hear this. Russell, the pilot of number 02, who had been thrown out of the cockpit, naturally couldn't reply. On the connected channel, he could vaguely hear the sound of wind coming from the walkie-talkie. "Captain, the detection device no longer shows the signal of number 02. I think," one of the pilots said. This caused the other 5 pilots, including the ace pilot, to feel a shadow in their hearts. The captain paused and raised his voice, "Everyone, be alert. Check the surrounding airspace. Other than the destroyed transport fighter, there are no other enemy fighter jets." Just as his voice rang out on the comms channel, an explosion suddenly roared in the sky beside him. Another one of his companions was inexplicably damaged. Billowing smoke and raging flames trailed behind its tail as it was destroyed and forced to land. "Number 06 fighter jet?" the captain exclaimed. The damaged fighter jet happened to be above him. When it fell straight down, it almost crashed into the fighter jet he was piloting. Fortunately, he was also an ace pilot in the Japanese Air Force. He controlled the fighter jet to increase its speed and flip to the side, beautifully avoiding this disaster. "Captain, I don't know what attack the rear wing of the fighter jet received. At this height, I'm afraid I'm going to die. The terrified voice of the pilot of number 06 rang out in the communication channel. It became weaker and weaker. Wait, I think I saw something. He seemed to have seen something before he died. Unfortunately, before he could finish speaking, he was cut off from the communication channel. Have you discovered any enemy fighter jets? What's going on? The captain roared angrily, using this to vent the fear in his heart. They had lost 2 fighter jets in a row, and in the end, they didn't even know who the enemy was. As a pilot for more than 10 years, this was the first time he had encountered such a strange thing at an altitude of 10,000 meters. No, we didn't find any traces of enemy fighters. Same here. It's too strange. What should we do, Captain? Hearing the replies of the remaining pilots, the captain said in a deep voice, let's gather together and lower the flight altitude. Yes. The 5 fighter jets reacted quickly and skillfully formed a square formation in the air. One of them was in the middle and lowered its altitude in parallel. Rumble, after the fighter jets collectively descended a few thousand meters, lightning flashed in the clouds below. From time to time, flashing purple lightning arcs illuminated the night sky. Lei Jiyun, you are really unlucky. Something's not right tonight. Since we've successfully destroyed the target transport fighter, why don't we turn back to base? A member suggested uneasily. The rest of the pilots were silent. The captain was slightly moved and was about to agree with this suggestion. At this moment, a member screamed in horror, "Captain! On your fighter jet! There's something!" This strange sentence attracted everyone's attention. They subconsciously looked at the fighter jet in the middle of the flying formation. Coincidentally, a huge thunder flashed in the thundercloud below. In a flash, the light illuminated the body of the fighter jet. At the tail of the single fighter jet, a young man in black armor was hunched over. His claws were nailed into the steel shell of the fighter jet, firmly attached to the fighter jet. The strong wind blew his blonde hair into the air. His body seemed to be made of steel under the close-fitting black night battle suit. He looked like a human-shaped demon. How is this possible? Captain, there's someone on your fighter jet. How can it be a human? It must be a monster. The rest of the pilots were shocked. The captain was terrified. He braced himself and looked back. At this time, Kale had already crawled to the cockpit that could only accommodate 1 person under the strong wind pressure. Kale was expressionless. His left hand sank into the shell of the fighter jet to stabilize his body. His right fist, which was wearing a vibranium arm guard, was raised and suddenly bombarded the protective glass. Under the captain's gaze, the thickened glass started to crack like a spider web from the outside to the inside, with the tip of the fist as the center. Please, don't. The captain's face in the cockpit was pale. Kale ignored his pleas and followed up with another punch on the damaged glass. The terrifying impact that could easily reach a ton exploded the broken glass and splashed inside. One of the broken glass flew directly into the captain's wide-open eye, killing him on the spot. The 3rd fighter jet. Kale said in his heart. He stood up and proudly stood on the fighter jet. He held his breath and glanced at the remaining 4 fighter jets on the side. Courtesy demands reciprocity. Since they took the initiative to come to the door, then none of them should think about running away. Without the control of the pilot, the fighter jet he was in tilted slightly and fell down like the previous destroyed fighter jets. Kale squatted slightly and jumped 1 step ahead, jumping toward the single fighter jet parallel to the rear. The amazing jumping force allowed him to jump more than 10 meters away and hit another fighter jet flying toward him head-on with his right elbow. This monster-like inhuman attack was effective with a simple blow. The windshield shattered, and the pilot lost control of the fighter jet and flew into the thunderclouds below. Kale groaned in pain. He was also thrown out due to the shock. The venom suit overflowed with crimson blood. He barely opened the gliding rear wings and hovered at a high altitude. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. The self-healing factor quickly took effect in his body. While suppressing the wound, it continued to heal the surface and internal injuries. In just a few seconds, the injuries on his body that were not serious injuries were completely healed. 3 more fighters. Kale's face was indifferent. With the dark and bloody wings, he sprinted toward the remaining fighter jets closest to him. The pilots in the fighter jets saw that the captain and his companions were destroyed by a humanoid monster in the blink of an eye. They didn't dare to stay any longer and quickly pulled the nose of the fighter jets to take off. Kale raised his eyes and looked at the fighter jets that had climbed more than 20 meters in front of him. His eyes narrowed slightly. Venom's gliding mode and diving speed could even reach supersonic speed. The only drawback was that it couldn't actively increase altitude. This was the biggest difference between flying and gliding. But this didn't mean that he couldn't climb in the air. Kale maintained his gliding state. His rear wings were pressed inwards against his back. His feet were bent to accumulate power, and then he stomped the air below. The dark red energy tide erupted under his feet, leaving a series of white air masses in place. He had sprinted nearly 30 meters into the air. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.